Chapter 2937. 2937 Fighting Side by Side. Chapter 2937. 2937 Fighting Side by Side. 2937 Fighting Side by Side. Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang appeared in time and intercepted the three sixth-tier monsters. Ling Han was surprised. Xian Chihu would actually move to help him. This guy was intent on killing Ling Han, and it was already very kind of him not to take advantage of the opportunity to hit him when he was down, but to actually help. Has the sun risen from the west? But Xian Chihu had indeed joined forces with Wu Haoyang and was battling extremely intensely with the three great sixth-tier monsters. That was definitely not an act. Ling Han could only say that in terms of the big picture, prodigies were impeccable, just like Xiao Yingxiong of the world's paramount martial academy. Faced with the surviving dregs of Hysteria's troops, he unhesitatingly left the hope of survival to Ling Han. Now that they were facing a great enemy, Xian Chihu did not think too much about it and directly charged forward. However, though Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang were the greatest prodigies of all eternity, they were only at the peak stage of the fifth tier, after all. Their battle prowess was close to the peak stage of the sixth tier, and they were actually no match for those three monsters in terms of power. Thankfully, they all possessed first-grade seals, and Xian Chihu, for example, possessed a set of first-grade combination seals. Once they were channeled, his battle prowess would completely crush his opponent. If this were the realm battlefield, then with Xian Chihu showing his might, his opponent would definitely be killed. However, these three monsters had intelligence. They clearly knew that Xian Chihu's power was already overwhelming, so how could they possibly face him head-on? They separated, choosing not to exchange blows with Xian Chihu. In just 2 hours, Xian Chihu's boosted power would be reduced to its original state. Xian Chihu naturally would not waste his own power for nothing. Since the enemy did not fight him head-on, he immediately stopped channeling the first-grade combination seals, and the battle instantly fell into a stalemate. Ling Han let out a battle cry and charged back. He, too, had sixth-tier battle prowess after all, so he couldn't just sit by and watch. The three great prodigies teamed up against three peak-stage sixth-tier monsters. No matter how much Xian Chihu restrained himself from using the first-grade combination seals, once he used them, he would lose one more chance to use them. After battling for 3 days, the energy release of his set of first-grade combination seals had been completely depleted. Instantly, the three monsters no longer had any reservations and began a mad barrage of attacks. Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang had each mastered a first-grade seal. This would surpass the second-grade seals that the three monsters used, but their original power was insufficient, and those could only compensate for the power gap between the two sides and could not give them a crushing advantage. The problem was that there were three monsters, and Ling Han was the weak link. His 8th-grade combination seals had already finished releasing energy, and though the 9th-grade combination seals could also increase his power by more than 200 times, it was still unable to close the gap in power between the two sides. The three great prodigies fell into a dilemma, but since they could become the greatest prodigies of all eternity, which of them did not have a tenacious will? So what if they were at a disadvantage, or even in a difficult situation? As long as there was a sliver of a chance, they would fight to the end. The three of them joined forces. It was clear that there had been no previous cooperation, but in practically the blink of an eye, they had formed a tacit understanding. They cooperated with each other, producing an effect of 1 + 1 that was greater than 3. On the other hand, the three sixth-tier monsters didn't have such excellent coordination. They all attacked on their own, their attacks random. It looked like though Hysteria had bestowed intelligence on them, it had to have held something back. Otherwise, they were already sixth tiers, so how could they not know how to cooperate at all? And it was precisely this that allowed the three great prodigies to hold up in the battle. After battling for more than half a month, all their heavenly venerable seals had been used up. They were clearly at an absolute disadvantage, yet defended extremely tenaciously. In fact, it could even be said that they were indomitable. By the looks of it, they could still continue battling. Another month, or even 1 or 2 years, wouldn't be a problem. Ha ha ha. The 3 great prodigies all laughed loudly. Though their bodies were covered with injuries, their fighting spirit was still incredibly high. After battling for another 3 months, other elites finally arrived. These were 2 6th-tier elites from the Flaming Frost Realm. Evil creatures die. The 2 great heavenly venerates immediately charged over. They weren't peak stage 6th tiers, but they still had 6th-tier battle prowess, and they were also a fresh force. Instantly, the disadvantage of Ling Han's side was reversed, but it was only a slight reversal. To say nothing of gaining an advantage, it couldn't even be considered a draw. However, another few days later, a second wave of 6th-tier elites arrived. In this manner, the 2 sides finally fought to a tie. The 3 Hysteria's creations communicated with their divine sense. Let's go! They reached a consensus and immediately retreated. Xianqihu and the others did not pursue. Firstly, they could not catch up, and secondly, so what if they did? Would they be able to win? The surviving dregs of Hysteria's troops actually dared to chase us all the way here. What audacity! A 6th-tier elite said. He was a little curious, but also a little angry. These Hysteria's creations didn't take them seriously at all. All of you be careful. We will go and contact the other 6 tiers and besiege these 3 evil creatures together, another 6th tier said. The 6th-tier elites all left, and very soon only Ling Han, Xianqihu, and Wu Haoyang were left. It is truly fun to fight side by side with the 2 of you. Wu Haoyang laughed loudly. Ling Han also smiled. He glanced at Xianqihu. After they had fought side by side, he had a more positive view of this guy now. Humph! Yet Xianqihu's expression was cold. He met Ling Han's gaze. Don't think that I will let you go just because you have fought side by side with me. Same to you, Ling Han said in reply. Remember to clean your neck as well. Sooner or later, I'll chop off your head. Then I'll kill you now. Xianqihu said balefully. Initially, on the basis of the battle just now, I wanted to spare you, but you insist on seeking death. Come on then. Ling Han crooked a finger, not afraid in the slightest. As a 6th tier as well, even if he was outmatched, it did not mean that he could not put up a fight. I'll oblige you. Xianqihu was just about to attack, yet he was stopped by Wu Haoyang. With him there really wouldn't be a fight. All right, listen to me. Ling Han, you head west. Xianqihu, you go east. He became the mediator, which also caused his expression to become very strange. Someone like him only had battle in his eyes, and now he was actually stopping others from starting a battle, which was a little awkward. Humph! Ling Han and Xianqihu exchanged a glance before turning around to leave. One headed east, while the other headed west. It was as if they were determined to never see each other again. That's right. Ling Han clapped his hands and threw out Feng Wuding. After making him return to his original form, he first snatched away the spatial tool that Feng Wuding had on him, and then tossed him over to Wu Haoyang. As Wu Haoyang and Xianqihu watched, the corners of their mouths twitched slightly. Ling Han robbed Feng Wuding right in front of their eyes, and this was not the first time, either. You keep bullying the same guy. Is that really good? Feng Wuding was also slowly waking up, and just happened to witness this scene. He couldn't help but throw up blood and fury. That was the accumulation of the World Alliance over innumerable years, and it had once again benefited Ling Han. Ling Han, you just wait. I will definitely kill you, he shouted loudly, his face filled with despondence. Since the heavens already gave birth to him. Feng Wuding, why did the heavens give birth to Ling Han? In practical terms, not officially, of course. Chapter 2938, 2938. Stand firm. Chapter 2938. 2938. Stand firm. 2938. Stand firm. Ling Han. Before Ling Han had left too long, he saw Bai Maifin running towards him. It's good that you're fine." He patted his chest. "How was it? Did Xian Chihu save you?" Ling Han was surprised. "You asked Xian Chihu for help." "I first encountered Xian Chihu and told him about the situation. Could it be that he didn't go and save you?" Bai Maifin was startled. Ling Han shook his head. "He came, and so did Wu Haoyang." "That's good." Bai Maifin nodded. Ling Han was really quite surprised. He had not expected that Xian Chihu would actually step out to save him, which taught him a good lesson. In a different situation, if Xian Chihu was the one being hunted down by Hysteria's army, would he help? Ling Han pondered for a moment before nodding slowly. No matter how great the conflict between him and Xian Chihu was, it was still an internal problem. No matter who won or lost, it would not have any adverse effects on the Flaming Frost realm. However, no matter what the Hysteria army did, as long as they succeeded, they would definitely hurt the Flaming Frost realm. Internal strife was one matter, but there had to be a bottom line. All right, Ling Han would accept this favor. If Xian Chihu were to fall into a siege of Hysteria's army in the future, he would save him. Come, let's continue digging for stones. The two of them walked around, looking for veins of ore and digging raw stones, and their yield was very bountiful. 100,000 years passed quickly, and it was time for the two of them to return. They set out on the path of return, and after asking around, they found out that the 3/6 tiers of Hysteria troops had not been discovered all this while. Who knew what corner they had hidden themselves in? These creatures had not been killed, and would still be a hidden danger. Who knew where they would suddenly appear from and deliver a fatal strike? They traveled through the void, and only a dozen over years later, the two of them returned to the realm battlefield. Next, they would be switching with a different batch of people who would be going off to explore the Genesis world of the last era. The Rain Emperor and Ji Wuming were both in this batch, but the Empress and Hunyo would have to wait. Lin Yilian had also left, which also meant that there was no one here to protect Ling Han. Xian Chihu could do as he liked. However, it was useless even if Lin Yilian did not leave. Xian Chihu had obtained great benefits in the Genesis world of the last era, and his strength had directly soared to peak stage 6th tier, already surpassing hers. Ling Han, on the other hand, was unconcerned. His battle prowess had already soared to the 6th tier. In this place where cultivation level was suppressed, he was completely capable of charging in and out of Hysteria's army. Of course, he could not withstand the combined attacks of tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of 5th tiers, either. Aside from the undying and indestructible 7th tier, even a 6th tier would be crushed into dust. Right now, Ling Han no longer had to worry about encountering Hysteria in the void, either. With 6th tier battle prowess, even Hysteria's doppelganger wouldn't be able to kill him. At most, Hysteria's doppelganger would only be able to wound him slightly. Since that was the case, Ling Han also gladly obeyed the command, and dived into Hysteria's base for a round of killing. Killing these monsters couldn't provide life essence, but the power of dimension in Ling Han's body was like a millstone. While dispersing these attacks, it could also transform a portion of the attacking power into his nutrition. It should be known that the hardest thing about improving Ling Han's cultivation level was the growth of these infinite powers of dimension inside his body. Now, these dimension seeds could absorb their own nutrients. This naturally made Ling Han happy. He distributed the great herbs and heavenly venerable seals that he had obtained from the Genesis world of the last era among the Empress and the others. Of course, there was also a share for Bai Maifin. Before this area became completely neutral, Hysteria's army obviously wouldn't attack. This was also a rare opportunity for them to improve their strength. Aside from battling, Ling Han also continued to cultivate in seclusion. Although there were fewer and fewer heavenly venerable seals that he could obtain from the Genesis world of the last era, it still allowed the number of seals he had mastered to reach as many as 300. When he channeled them together, his cultivation speed increased by close to 2,000 times. There was no need to concern himself with the power of dimension in his body, so Ling Han's cultivation progress naturally increased. He had hopes of reaching the peak stage of the 4th tier in 200 million to 300 million years. Meanwhile, the seeds that had already evolved into dimensions in his body were also rapidly growing. 100,000 years later, the second batch of people returned, and the third batch set out. The Empress and Hunyo were both included in this batch. Ling Han reminded the two women to be careful, while he continued to battle at Hysteria's base to improve his power of dimension. Merely after 700,000 years, the dimensions inside Ling Han's body had completely caught up with his cultivation level. He was still in the early stage of the 4th tier. If there had been a gap of 100 steps between the early stage of the 4th tier and the middle stage, he would have taken about 2 steps by now. However, even though he had only just achieved minimal progress, it increased the upper limit of the number of dimensions he could accommodate to as many as 200. By now, these dimensions had all reached medium level and were close to high level. If they were released all at once, even only as projections, they would be extremely shocking. The Empress and Hunyo had long since returned, and after 1 million years, it was finally Ling Han's turn to go to the Genesis world of the last era again. But before they could set out, they had no choice but to postpone their plans. That was because Hysteria's army had finally launched an attack. A boundless army charged over, and those densely packed numbers caused one's scalp to go numb with terror. Yet Ling Han was not concerned at all. He took the initiative to charge out and released 20-dimensional projections in a single stroke. Now, these dimensions were all close to high level, and even 5th tiers would be affected slightly, while 4th tiers would be directly smashed to the ground. Ling Han shot out a punch, and over 1,000 Hysteria troops were instantly crushed and killed. Seeing that he was so violent and powerful, everyone was stunned, but they were also filled with excitement. With a genius like Ling Han standing guard, what was Hysteria's army worth? It was not just Ling Han. Xian Chihu, Wu Haoyang, and Lin Yulian also displayed world-shaking strength. Though Feng Wuding had been repeatedly robbed by Ling Han, making him look weak, he was in truth a prodigy that was only inferior to Ling Han. The advancement of his cultivation level was frightening, as he had already reached the middle stage of the 4th tier. Although his battle prowess had yet to reach the 6th tier, he could already sweep aside all other 5th tier elites. It had to be admitted that the Genesis world of the last era had really helped them greatly. In this battle, though the Flaming Frost Realm did not have the advantage of the dimensional suppression, Ling Han, Xian Chihu, and the other prodigies were too awesome. Their presence had the effect of stabilizing the situation, and they actually managed to defend their base successfully. Though they had paid the price of over 100 heavenly venerates dying in battle, and more than 2,000 were severely wounded, a great victory still made everyone feel satisfied and gave rise to a strong confidence. Finally, their only path was not just retreat. They could also stand their ground. After a great victory, everyone hurriedly took advantage of the time to rest and reorganize. Now that they had not given up their base, it also meant that Hysteria's army could possibly launch an attack not too long after. Ling Han's journey could only be postponed indefinitely as well. At present, there was definitely no way he could leave. As expected, only a few years later, Hysteria's army attacked again but was forced back. In the past, there were only Xian Chihu and the other 2 great elites, but adding Ling Han and Feng Wuding, 2 people with 6th tier battle prowess, now had a tremendous influence on the battle. Chapter 2939. 2939, Take Your Life. Chapter 2939. 2939, Take Your Life. 2939, Take Your Life. Within the next 100 years, the Hysteria army would go on to launch over 30 assaults of varying scale. However, they all fell flat, unable to advance a single step. In all these battles, Feng Wuding displayed the best performance of all. It was as though he wanted to prove to everyone that he was the only one who could defeat Hysteria and become the savior of the Genesis world. To that end, he used every ounce of strength in all his battles without holding anything back. In the most recent battle, he released 21 dimensional projections, surpassing Ling Han's previous number of 20. It was obvious Feng Wuding was satisfied with being able to prove that he was better than Ling Han. On the other hand, Ling Han wasn't all too concerned about it. Such contests for pride were pointless. Actual strength in battle was what he cared about. 200 years, 500 years, they had defended against the Hysteria army countless times. In the blink of an eye, 1,000,000 years had passed. Ling Han wasn't going to stop with his decapitation missions. Even though they were now able to withstand the attacks from the Hysteria army, there would be a difference in the number of casualties with and without an intelligent monster taking charge. Ling Han would bring Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan with him. Given his current strength, he was more than capable of guaranteeing their safety, so he thought it would be good to train them a little as well. On the other hand, Feng Wuding was trying to compete with Ling Han on all fronts. He also started his own little guerrilla strike force, taking along 3 members as he continuously killed his way into enemy territory. He wanted to compete against Ling Han on their battle records. However, Feng Wuding didn't have the ability to traverse the void. There were a few times he got trapped by the enemy, and while he was able to escape, his 3 teammates all perished under the encirclement. After repeated failures, it didn't matter if he was the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era. There was no heavenly venerate willing to risk their life with him. As a result, Feng Wuding could only try to do things by himself. However, there was one time he fell for the enemy's trap and had to be rescued by Ling Han, Exayan and the other generals. After that, he never charged into enemy territory again. It was too embarrassing. Ha ha ha. Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan burst out laughing when they heard the news. They didn't like Feng Wuding to begin with. It was natural they would be ecstatic to see him fail so miserably. To think he dreams of competing against us. I hope he learns his lesson now, Bai Meifeng said. He had always resented Feng Wuding ever since he lost to him. However, because they were equal in terms of cultivation level, Bai Meifeng didn't have any advantage in battle, and thus could not defeat Feng Wuding. Come, come, come. Let's drink. Fu Yuan raised his cup. Ling Han and the others also raised their cups and clinked them together. They were not within the base at the moment. Instead, they were at a spot about 3 days' journey from it. Originally, this place was just a regular valley, but it had become quite a scenic spot because of the clashing of 2 dimensions. That said, Feng Wuding is powerful indeed. If Boss wasn't around, he would be virtually unbeatable by anyone of the same cultivation level, Xian Feng mused. Bai Meifeng and Fu Yuan nodded their heads. They couldn't deny that. There's no helping it. He only has his own luck to blame for being born in the wrong era and meeting our boss. Fu Yuan laughed. Even though both Fu Yuan and Xian Feng were both 5th tiers, they had no qualms about calling Ling Han their boss. One's cultivation level mattered when it came to the realm of martial prowess, but one's strength even more so. Once Boss gains another level and becomes a 5th tier, he will have a 7th tier's battle prowess. There'll be no one stopping him then, Fu Yuan said. Even though he was just trying to flatter Ling Han, there was an ounce of truth in it as well. Ling Han was just about to speak up, but he suddenly turned his head, ears perked. What's wrong? Bai Meifeng asked. Ling Han gestured for everyone to keep quiet. After a while, he said, We have a guest. Who? Bai Meifeng and the others asked. It's us. A voice resounded as a plain-looking man casually approached. He had a faint smile on his face, and his eyes were narrowed into slits, as though they couldn't be opened. "May I ask who you are?" Fu Yuan immediately stood up. "Also, you set us?" Xianfeng asked. Soon, more figures appeared, each one of them with an imposing presence. Fifth tier, fifth tier, fifth tier. These people were all fifth tier heavenly venerates, and there were as many as 88 of them. Each one of them had a terrifying aura. Ling Han swept a glance across. "Something I can help you with." "We're here to take your life," the plain-looking person said. "I take it you're all just like Meng Dong and are Hysteria's agents." Ling Han acknowledged them. "Indeed," the plain-looking person said. He bowed slightly. "I am Huangfu Dongyue. Little brother, I've wanted to meet you for a long time, and now that we have, I must say it's such a pity." He was implying that if Ling Han hadn't betrayed Hysteria, then they would have been a family and would have met much earlier. Ling Han laughed. "Well, better late than never." Another fifth tier pointed a finger at Ling Han and rebuked angrily. "Ling Han, do you think you can just do as you please after betraying the main body?" "What?" Bai Meifeng, Xianfeng, and Fu Yuan were all taken aback. Judging from the other party's words, it seemed like Ling Han was one of Hysteria's agents, but had switched sides. Ling Han was one of Hysteria's men. The news was too overwhelming. If it were to spread to the realm battlefield, it would be sure to cause a great commotion. Who would dare use one of Hysteria's men? After all, he could suddenly go berserk and stab you in the back. Bai Meifeng looked at Ling Han and asked, "Brother Ling Yu?" "Boss." Xianfeng and Fu Yuan were also astonished. Ling Han casually waved his hand. "I'll explain it to you later." "There is no later. You are going to die here right now," Huangfu Dongyue coldly remarked. "Is that so?" Ling Han looked around at the fifth tier heavenly venerates and couldn't help laughing. "It's not that I'm looking down on you all, but to me, you're all nothing more than cannon fodder. I can take you all on with one hand even if you come at me together. Then I'd like to see you try," Huangfu Dongyue said in a somber tone. He then shouted, "For the main body! Our deaths will only return us to the main body." 10 fifth tier heavenly venerates immediately shouted back, and then leapt forward together. After that, something strange happened as all 10 of them started to fuse together. Their resulting aura skyrocketed, instantly breaking through the limitations of the 5th tier and reaching 6th tier. Bai Meifeng and the rest were flabbergasted. How was this possible? Ling Han had seen it before, so he wasn't surprised. However, he couldn't help frowning. This was their trump card. Hysteria should know that he already had a 6th tier's battle prowess. It didn't matter what kind of combination monster they threw at him. Even if all these people were to fuse together, they wouldn't be able to beat him as long as they didn't reach the 7th tier. 7th tier. That was not possible. Even if Hysteria's body became an entire dimension, it couldn't possibly create a 7th tier combatant. However, these people had sure been hiding themselves for a significant amount of time, and now they were revealing themselves all in one go. Wouldn't this just be a foolish act if they weren't absolutely sure of themselves? Hysteria would never do something so foolish. Moreover, these people had actual intelligence and naturally wouldn't be so stupid either. Hold on. How did all these people suddenly show up here? Chapter 2940. 2940 Fatal Trap. Chapter 2940. 2940 Fatal Trap. 2940 Fatal Trap. For the sake of the main body! Another 10 people shouted loudly, and then fused together, turning into a creature that was 30 meters tall. It had many arms, legs, and eyes, becoming a complete monster. 2 6th-tier monsters. More and more people released loud roars and fused together, and there were more and more 6th-tier monsters. Ling Han sighed. After these people were fused together, they possessed the unique trait of hysteria, and he could not absorb their life essence. This was a pity, but they still had heavenly venerable seals, and these would not disappear with their fusion. This time, he was not going to fall for Hysteria's trick again. After he killed them, he would directly search their souls. Ling Han, it's time for us to return to the main body, Huang Dongyue said. Right now. Only he and 7 other people hadn't fused together yet. Ling Han shook his head, not interested. That's not up to you. Huang Dongyue let out a battle cry, and the 8 6th-tier monsters immediately charged towards Ling Han. First-grade seals lit up, showing astonishing might. 6th-tier battle prowess further boosted with first-grade seals. Just how powerful was this? It really isn't enough. Ling Han was completely unconcerned. Fusion monsters only had the battle prowess of early-stage 6th tier. Even if they were boosted with first-grade seals, they would only be able to reach late-stage 6th tier in terms of battle prowess. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already completely stabilized his cultivation level during these years. His basic power was similarly at the early stage of the 6th tier. He also possessed a first-grade seal, as well as 9th and 8th grade combination seals. Not only was his power not inferior, but it was even stronger. However, there were 8 6th-tier monsters on the opposing side after all. If they worked together, they could still match Ling Han and his group with only a slight disadvantage. Charge! Huangfu Dongyue and the others also charged towards Bai Maifin, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. The battle royale began. Though Bai Maifin was a 4th tier, he was a super genius that was not inferior to Xan Chihu. Moreover, after all these years, he had also reached the peak stage of the 4th tier, and his battle prowess soared to peak stage 5th tier. Not only was he not inferior to Huangfu Dongyue and the others, he wasn't at a disadvantage even in a battle of 2 against 1. However, Fu Yuan and Xian Feng weren't as powerful. It should be known that Huangfu Dongyue and the others had all received a first-grade Heavenly Venerable Seal inheritance package from Hysteria. With the boost of more than 80 times of power, they were instantly pushed to their limits. Moreover, Huangfu Dongyue and the others still had an advantage in numbers. If it weren't for Bai Maifin continuously rescuing them, Fu Yuan and Xian Feng wouldn't have been able to last this long at all. Even so, they were still in a perilous situation. It was possible that they would collapse at any moment. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and as he exchanged blows with the 8 fusion monsters, he continued to rush towards Fu Yuan and Xian Feng. Boom! He threw out a punch, instantly sending 3 5th tiers flying and resolving Xian Feng's pressing crisis. However, Fu Yuan was struck by 2 5th tiers and instantly threw up blood violently. He stumbled, his face as pale as paper. Ling Han hurriedly charged forward. Although the 8 fusion monsters tried their best to stop him, they still couldn't succeed. He stretched out a hand and grabbed out at Fu Yuan. Right at this moment, light suddenly lit up on Fu Yuan's chest. Xiao, xiao, xiao! 3 spots of light flew out, and then rapidly enlarged, turning into 3 figures. No, they cannot be considered figures, but rather 3 monsters. But the aura they exuded was incredibly terrifying. Furthermore, the aura they exuded was incredibly strong, and had shockingly reached the 6th tier, even stronger than those 8 fusion monsters. They were actually those 3 monsters that had sniped Ling Han in the Genesis world of the last era. Why had they flown out from Fu Yuan's body? Had Fu Yuan been coerced? Or, when he had been completely unaware, these 3 monsters had possessed him? This should not be possible. For better or worse, he was still a 5th tier elite, and even if he was no match for a 6th tier, how could he not have the slightest reaction when 3 6th tier elites had hidden themselves inside his body? The 3 great 6th tiers attacked, each channeling a 2nd grade seal, which boosted their power by more than 70 times, pressing down on Ling Han. The 8 fusion monsters also took advantage of the opening to make their move. The number of Heavenly Venerable Seals flickering on their bodies instantly reached as many as 10. and their power increased explosively by more than 400 times. These were combination seals. They had not used them previously because they wanted to lull Ling Han into a false sense of security. It should be known that there were a total of over 100 of them, and each of them had a first-grade seal, which was completely capable of forming a sequence. Now, 3 peak stage 6th-tier elites were attacking Ling Han head-on, and there were also 8 other 6th-tier elites who were slightly weaker that had been boosted more than 400 times in power. They had also boosted their battle prowess to the peak stage of the 6th tier, and both sides formed a pincer attack. This was a trap, a deadly trap aimed at Ling Han. Everything that had happened previously had all been an act, all for the sake of this moment, to deal a fatal blow to Ling Han. Fu Yuan smiled coldly. Judging by his understanding of Ling Han definitely wouldn't be able to resolve this. Ling Han, boss. Bai Meifan and Xian Feng both exclaimed in surprise. This seemed to be a dead end. Whether it was Xian Chihu or Feng wooing in his place, they could only die helplessly. Ling Han also felt his hair stand on ends. This was the battle prowess of a total of 11 peak stage 6 tiers, and every single one of them was stronger than him. Furthermore, it was not just by a bit, either. Their combined force was enough to deal him severe injury. But the more severe the circumstances, the calmer Ling Han became. He felt his fighting spirit rise up from the depths of his heart. This was what was interesting. He released a battle cry. Wang. All the dimensions in his body were released. It was not just 1 or 2, but a total of 200 of them. They were not projections, either, but actual dimensions. 200 medium-level dimensions that were extremely close to reaching high-level. What kind of concept was this? So what if they were 6 tiers? Their bodies involuntarily trembled, and their attacks were slightly halted. However, the 6th tier was the 6th tier, after all. As power surged, cracks appeared on the 200 dimensions. Taking advantage of this chance, Ling Han leaped and retreated rapidly. He grabbed Bai Meifan and Xianfeng, and then tore a rip into space. He stepped through, and the 200 dimensions were absorbed into his body at the same time. Xiao, the hole in the void, closed up behind him. In the instant that the hole in the void closed up, Ling cast a deep look at Fu Yuan. It was as if he was staring at a dead man. Then he turned around and left resolutely. Shua, a black shadow whipped over, exuding a terrifying aura that could suppress the ages and destroy the heavens. Hysteria. Ha! It was really one move after another. Ling Han had no way out. If he left the void at this moment, he would have to fight against those 11 6th-tier elites again. He released a battle cry and channeled all the 8th grade seals at the same time. He burst with his full power to greet this blow from Hysteria. Pum! Instantly, his whole body trembled violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even if Hysteria had only sent out a doppelganger, its power had still reached the peak stage of the 6th tier, and it was even stronger than those subordinates outside. However, Ling Han still managed to block this blow. Hysteria was incomparably cold. Though its first strike had not succeeded, it was completely emotionless. It delivered another attack. The black tentacle swept through the void. Its main body was far away in the realm battlefield, but its attack still easily reached its target. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Han had already taken a step. He tore a rip into space again and instantly exited the void. Hysteria's attack came. This strike had followed him out of the void and was continuing to whip towards Ling Han. Scram! Ling Han roared loudly and attacked with both fists. The 200 dimensions were unleashed at the same time, forming an incomparably powerful oppressive force. Finally, Hysteria's tentacle was blasted back. Chapter 2941. 2941 Setting Out on a New Journey. Chapter 2941. 2941 Setting Out on a New Journey. 2941 Setting Out on a New Journey. Who? Ling Han tossed out Xianfeng and by Myfin. The three of them lay on the ground, panting heavily. It had been extremely dangerous, just now. Whether it was the 11 6th-tier elites ganging up on Ling Han or Hysteria's attack at the end, those were both perilous situations. If Ling Han's reaction speed had been slightly slower, or his strength had been the slightest bit lower, he would definitely have been a dead man by now. I never would have thought that Fu Yuan was actually a traitor. Bai Myfin slammed his fist into the ground, revealing an expression of fury. Xian Feng was outraged as well, and also felt an indescribable feeling of pain. The four of them had fought side by side for several 100 million years. Who would have thought that the companion that they had left their backs to would actually be one of Hysteria's subordinates? Ling Han's expression was also very cold. If it was just his suspicions that Fu Yuan had been coerced at first, then he naturally could confirm by now that Fu Yuan was also one of Hysteria's pawns, just like Mingdong. However, he was even better hidden. In fact, he had even boldly appeared as a companion by Ling Han's side, and the only reason for that was to find a chance to kill Ling Han. In the decapitation mission carried out previously, Hysteria had ambushed him, and Ling Han almost had not managed to return. Now that he was thinking back on it, it had to have been Fu Yuan that had leaked his whereabouts. Ling Han had always been looking for the enemy agent that was near him. The one he had suspected the most had been Xian Chihu. But when Xian Chihu and Wu Haoying had come together to save him previously, Ling Han was convinced that though Xian Chihu was no good guy, he would not betray his principles. Now that the truth was out, he was still somewhat unwilling to believe it. If I see him next time, I will definitely chop off his head and dig out his heart to see what color his heart is, Xian Feng shouted loudly. This bastard, just what great benefits has Hysteria bestowed on him that he would actually betray his own people? Bai Myfin said through gritted teeth. Also, what the heck is going on with those people? How can they fuse with one another and become something so bizarre? Both of them turned to look at Ling Han at the same time, naturally hoping that Ling Han could give them an answer. Ling Han organized his thoughts and revealed how Hysteria had set up his pawns years ago. He did not hide his identity. They were his brothers. Was there any need to hide things from them? Xian Feng and Bai Myfin naturally would not suspect Ling Han. With Hysteria laying out a trap to kill him like this, if there was still a problem with Ling Han, that would be too unfathomable. I never imagined that Hysteria had pulled off such a cunning plot. Bai Myfin exclaimed. Everyone's impression of Hysteria was that it was extremely powerful, and even 7th tiers would have to join forces to be able to resist it successfully, but it was also because of such great power that they overlooked the side of Hysteria that was intelligent. Even if Hysteria hadn't had intelligence at that time, even if it had become an idiot in the explosion of the Genesis world of the last era, leaving behind only a sliver of its soul, after regaining the strength of a 7th tier, and after so many epochs of development, how could it be that it still couldn't develop astonishing intelligence? It had not played any tricks all this while because it had not needed to. Its strength had been enough to overwhelm its enemies. However, after being unable to take down the Flaming Frost realm for a long time, Hysteria finally adjusted its battle strategy. From sending out undercover agents to adjusting the composition of the army and adding in intelligent creations were all things that showed Hysteria's desire for change. However, after this battle, Hysteria's undercover spies should have been more or less eliminated, Ling Han said. The only unfortunate thing was that as the 8 fusion monsters died, the 81st grade seals they had would also disappear. That was 80 first grade seals, and it was extremely possible that they could form a sequence, turning into extremely terrifying combination seals. Ling Han felt like his heart was bleeding. Initially, he had already considered them as his private property, yet it was all for naught in the end, which made him extremely depressed. They returned to base camp and did not speak of how they had been ambushed, because this involved Ling Han's identity. Furthermore, it would not be of any help even if they spoke of it. Zhou Hun and the others were aware of this even earlier. However, The bomb beside him had finally exploded. Ling Han still felt a sense of relief and was even a little glad. What if they had targeted the Empress, Hu Niu, Ling Shi, Ling Jinxue, and the others? Then it would really have been difficult for Ling Han to deal with. Because Ling Han's strength had advanced to the 6th tier, he had also become one of the commanders-in-chief and was on equal footing with Xan Chihu and the others. Additionally, there was also Feng Wuding, who turned them from the previous 3 great generals into the current 5 heavenly kings. Ling Han made a suggestion. No matter what, they had to assign some people to the Genesis world of the last era, especially from among the 5 of them. The clash with Hysteria would still have to depend on the high-end powerhouses. That was because it was Hysteria that had started this invasion. If Hysteria itself could not be defeated, it could endlessly launch attacks, and there would never come a day of peace. So ultimately, war would still have to depend on 7th-tier battle prowess. Resisting here was passive. Even if Hysteria's troops could be halted eternally here, so what? Would that resolve the problem of Hysteria? Regarding this suggestion, even Xian Chihu and Feng Wuding agreed very much. Even if they had a lot of conflicts with Ling Han, they all had a high opinion of themselves and thought that they could deal with the great problem of Hysteria. Even if they retreated slightly here, as long as they could advance to the 6th tier or 7th tier, sacrificing some territory would be worth it. To say the least, the advancement of the profound negative realm to the transcendent level was very smooth. Even if they lost the Flaming Frost realm, it would not be the end of the world. After a round of discussions, the 5 of them reached an agreement to resume the travels to the Genesis world of the last era. However, the 5 of them could not all leave. Otherwise, if there was no one standing guard here, who knew what kind of trouble the various forces would cause? After drawing lots, Wu Haoyang and Lin Yulian were those to leave with the first batch, and it was still for a period of 100,000 years. When they returned, Ling Han, Xian Chihu, and Feng Wuding drew lots again. The result was that Feng Wuding became the one who had to stay behind. He could only be mobilized next time. Ling Han brought the Empress and Hu Niu with him. This time, it was a mutual decision made by the 5 commanders. Naturally, they could decide whom they would go with. However, this was too coincidental. He actually was in the same batch with Xian Chihu again. Ling Han deliberately avoided Xian Chihu and set out quietly along with the Empress and Hu Niu. Otherwise, that guy might make a move on him again. The 3 of them arrived at the Genesis world of the last era. They then started to search for a spatial passageway. Ling Han's expression was filled with anticipation. If he could advance to the 5th tier this time, he would be able to possess the battle prowess of the 7th tier and become the strongest existence in the Genesis world. Although there were also differences in strength among 7th tiers, he could still be unafraid of anyone. However, their luck wasn't all that good. After searching for 90,000 years, they finally discovered a spatial passageway that led to a new dimension. However, this place was extremely dangerous. Energy storms were everywhere, and even if Ling Han possessed the battle prowess of the 6th tier, it was still difficult for him. His gains in these 10,000 years were pitifully little. Time was up and they returned. After arriving at the base camp, Ling Han discovered that everyone was looking at him strangely. Chapter 2942 2942 Leaked Secret. Chapter 2942 2942 Leaked Secret. 2942 Leaked Secret. As Ling Han walked along, he noticed that everyone was glancing at him with strange expressions as if they were looking at a monster. In fact, some of them didn't even try to conceal the look of disgust in their eyes. "Phut, have I offended you or something?" Ling Han and the Empress weren't too affected by this, but Hu Niu directly glared back at them. What? Did they think that she didn't know how to glare? "Boss! Ling Han! 4th brother! Xian Feng! The Rain Emperor!" And the others all ran over, their expressions extremely solemn. "What's wrong?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Has the sky collapsed? Even if it has, I can help you guys hold it up. His battle prowess was at the 6th tier now, so he truly had the right to utter such words. Boss, something has genuinely gone wrong, Xian Feng hurriedly said. He paused for a moment before continuing. I don't know who did it, but someone exposed your relationship with Hysteria, and now news of this is spreading like wildfire. Ling Han's expression became cold and solemn. Few people knew that he had been selected by Hysteria before. Apart from his wives, the only other people who knew were by Maifin, Xian Feng, Zhou Heng, and the others. However, Ling Han was certain that none of them would leak the secret. Who could it be? Thinking about it, it could only be the subordinates of Hysteria, such as Huangfu Dongyue. When trying to kill someone, sometimes it wasn't necessary to target them yourself. Borrowing the hands of another was equally effective, and it could even save some effort. It was definitely these people who had spread the news of Ling Han's relationship with Hysteria. Their aim was to drive a wedge between Ling Han and the others, and perhaps even cause the others to become hostile toward him and eventually try to hunt him down. At that time, Ling Han would have no allies, and he would instead end up being hunted by both sides. Taking a step back, would Ling Han feel disheartened if he were hunted by his own allies? Even though Ling Han knew that this was Hysteria's scheme, he would still feel fury toward those who treated him with contempt and disdain. Would this cause him to feel disappointed in all of them? In any case, Hysteria didn't really care how big the wedge between Ling Han and the others became. All it needed was for Huangfu Dongyue and the others to spread some rumors. After all, this wouldn't cost them anything. These thoughts quickly flashed through Ling Han's mind. He had to admit that this was an extremely ruthless and effective scheme from Hysteria. He could guarantee that he would never take commands from Hysteria. However, how many others would trust him? Ling Han! Someone shouted as they flew over from the distance. He looked Ling Han up and down with a disdainful expression before saying, "The 4 generals are calling you over for a meeting." Ling Han was extremely ticked off. This person was Feng Wuding's subordinate, and he had also come from the Genesis world of the last era. He was quite powerful, and he had already reached the 3rd tier right now. This was indeed quite impressive. However, would Ling Han be afraid of a measly 3rd tier cultivator? I'm a commander of the coalition army, yet you dare to directly call my name? Are you trying to disrespect your superior? Ling Han asked. His gaze was cold as he looked at the person. Regardless of what was going to happen after this, and regardless of how they were going to resolve the situation, he definitely wouldn't allow others to trample over his dignity. Everyone needed to have a bottom line. The 3rd tier Heavenly Venerate hadn't imagined that Ling Han would scold him, because he thought that Ling Han should have been extremely panicked after his relationship with Hysteria had been exposed. With that being the case, how could he have the confidence to scold him? The 3rd tier Heavenly Venerate wanted to retort Ling Han, yet he couldn't help but feel apprehensive before this 6th tier Heavenly Venerate. His courage instantly vanished without a trace. He hesitated for a moment before clasping his hands in respect and saying, "This subordinate doesn't dare!" "What's the matter?" Ling Han asked calmly. "What's the matter? Aren't you aware already? Why are you still playing dumb?" However, he had just been intimidated by Ling Han, so how would he dare to talk back? He could only say, "Lord, the 4 commanders are currently waiting for you in the meeting hall." "You're finally speaking a bit like a human," Bai Maifin said coldly. He had always disliked Feng Wuding. Moreover, he was the grandson of a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate, so he naturally didn't need to choose his words carefully. The 3rd tier Heavenly Venerate wanted to glare at him, yet upon recalling that Bai Maifin was one of the greatest prodigies of all eternity, he immediately suppressed his urge. Even though Bai Maifin wasn't as prodigious as Feng Wuding, he was still countless times more powerful than this messenger. If he dared to provoke Bai Maifin, he would almost deserve to be beaten into a cripple. Underlings should understand that they're nothing more than underlings. Why are you so keen to rush to the front line? Do you want to become cannon fodder? The Rain Emperor asked in a calm voice. The third tier Heavenly Venerate didn't dare to provoke Ling Han and the others, so he could only keep his mouth shut and endure the scolding. In any case, there was a trial awaiting Ling Han, and he would definitely receive his punishment there. That being the case, there was indeed no need for him to rush to the front lines. "Lord, after you," he said as he respectfully made a gesture of invitation. Ling Han completely ignored him. Even though he set off, it wasn't in the direction of the meeting hall. "Lord!" The third tier Heavenly Venerate hurriedly ran over to stop him. "Pum!" The Empress lashed out with a palm strike, instantly sending the third tier Heavenly Venerate flying. Crack! He flew back, causing a long and deep pit to form in the ground. The Empress had advanced to the fourth tier quite a while ago, and there was the power of 100 dimensions in her body. Even though she was unable to challenge those a tier above her now, would this extra tier of cultivation not cause her power to become overwhelming? Ling Han paused for a brief moment, saying, "I just got back, so I need to have a rest first. Are you going to stop me?" "I wouldn't dare," the third tier Heavenly Venerate said. He had no option but to swallow his displeasure. He lowered his head, his eyes filled with resentment and fury. He was at the third tier. He was a mighty third tier Heavenly Venerate who stood at the pinnacle of the world. Ling Han smiled as he continued to walk forward. They wanted to put him on trial? He had a clear conscience, so who had the right to try him and sentence him? After he returned to his residence, the Rain Emperor and the others hurriedly asked him what his plan was. "My plan?" Ling Han replied with a smile. "I'll counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir." "Fourth brother, what in the world is going on?" the Rain Emperor asked. He had also heard from others that Ling Han had some kind of relationship with Hysteria. Ling Han explained to them how he had been chosen by Hysteria, not hiding any of the details. "So Lord Zhou and Lord Lin already know about this," the others said, breathing a sigh of relief. Since the sixth-tier elites already knew about this, it would definitely be very easy to resolve. The trial tomorrow will most likely only be for show. Lord Zhou and Lord Chu aren't ordinary sixth-tier elites. They're only a small step away from advancing to the seventh tier, and this is a step that they might take at any time. Perhaps they've already advanced to the seventh tier. Their words will definitely carry a huge weight, but we still need to be careful. Some people might try to seize this opportunity to cause trouble and smear little Han's reputation, the large black dog said. If that happens, then these people are definitely listening to the commands of Xian Chihu and Feng Wuding. Otherwise, who would dare to do that? Bai Maifin said. Everyone nodded in agreement. Most likely the only people who would take advantage of this situation to attack Ling Han were Xian Chihu and Feng Wuding. A day quickly passed by. It was extremely calm, and Xian Chihu and the others didn't send anyone over to call Ling Han. However, everyone knew that this was the calm before the storm. The quieter it was now, the more terrifying the storm would be when it arrived. The next day, Ling Han didn't need anyone to come over to call him. He confidently strode toward the meeting hall. What if the others wanted to attack and smear him? Then go for it. He would take everything that they could throw at him. When he arrived at the meeting hall, he saw that there were already many people gathered around. Meanwhile, Lin Yolian, Xian Chihu, and the others were sitting high up on the platform. The show was about to begin. Chapter 2943 2943 Debate. Chapter 2943 2943 Debate. 2943 Debate. After entering the meeting hall, Ling Han walked toward the main seats on the platform. He was one of the 5 commanders, so one of these seats naturally belonged to him. Hold it there, Feng Wuding suddenly said. He raised a hand and continued, Ling Han, your position is in question now, so you don't have the right to sit here. Oh, I don't have the right just because you said so? Ling Han said as he looked at Feng Wuding. You're nothing but a defeated opponent, so quit jabbering in front of me. Do you want to lose everything again? Fuck. Feng Wuding's expression instantly became extremely colorful, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Being defeated by Ling Han was the only stain on his reputation. Moreover, he had been stripped of his wealth by Ling Han several times, and this had hurt him to the core. Now, Ling Han was exposing these old wounds before everyone, so he was naturally both humiliated and infuriated. Ling Han, let's battle. I refuse to believe that I'll lose to you again, he roared. His cultivation speed was faster than Ling Han's, so he now possessed a slight advantage over him in terms of cultivation level. As a result, he rediscovered some of his confidence. Come on then, Ling Han said as he crooked a finger at him. Whoever doesn't dare to fight is a bastard. Everyone was rendered speechless. They were all heavenly venerates, so could they try to speak in a more elegant manner? Why did they sound like hooligans? Feng Wuding angrily stood up, and he was just about to launch an attack. Stop, Exayanchehu said as he reached over to block him. Don't forget what our purpose is today. Feng Wuding's heart jolted upon hearing this. Indeed, he had almost been led off track by Ling Han. They were trying Ling Han for colluding with the enemy today, so how had the conversation ended up so far astray? The others also slapped their heads in realization. Ling Han's ability to control the conversation was far too powerful, so much so that they had also been unknowingly dragged down the wrong track. Ling Han, what do you have to say about the current rumors? Feng Wuding asked. Ling Han shook his head and replied, Don't try to change the topic. Why don't I have the right to sit here? Did you decide? Or was it someone else? Before the investigation is complete, Ling Han is still one of the 5 commanders. Thus, one of these seats belongs to him. Lin Yulian finally said. She naturally supported Ling Han. Wu Haoyang nodded and said, I agree. I disagree, Feng Wuding immediately said. I also disagree, Exayanchehu said. It was 2 votes to 2, so whom should they listen to? Ling Han strode forward and directly sat down on the empty seat, saying, Since I haven't been dismissed, I'm naturally still one of the commanders. That gives me the right to cast a vote. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement. Ling Han had won the first round of the power struggle. Feng Wuding glanced at Exayanchehu, and he saw that his expression was calm and composed. It was as if he hadn't been affected at all. Upon seeing this, he also gradually calmed down. Losing the first round didn't matter much in the scheme of things. As long as they could prove that Ling Han was a traitor, he would ultimately become nothing more than a rat whom everyone viewed with scorn. Commander. He would be criticized by all, and his name would be mentioned with disdain for eternity. Fine. Before the trial is complete, we'll tentatively concede that you're still one of the 5 commanders, Feng Wuding said. However, he was feeling slightly puzzled at this moment. He was clearly more talented than Exayanchehu, and his future was also brighter. So why had he become Exayanchehu's pawn instead? Why was he the one doing all the hard work? Ling Han sneered and said, Do I need you, a defeated opponent, to concede this? Regardless of whether you concede it or not, I am me, and this won't change a single bit. Detestable, utterly detestable. Feng Wuding felt a strong urge to kill someone. He was clearly someone with powerful self-control, so why was he always enraged by Ling Han? He took a deep breath and said, Ling Han, there are rumors saying that you're a subordinate of Hysteria. Is that true? These allegations are absolutely untrue, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He completely denied the accusation. This was nothing but a rumor, so who could prove it? Feng Wuding faltered upon hearing this. This reply was far too casual, no? Did he want to end the trial just like that? His voice became baleful as he said, Then do you have any proof that you're not Hysteria's subordinate? Then, do you have any proof that I am Hysteria's subordinate? Ling Han retorted. Fuck. Feng Wuding couldn't help but falter upon hearing this. Was he the one doing the interrogation, or was he the one being interrogated? Ling Han, stop trying to prevaricate, he roared. Prevaricate your mom. Ling Han sneered. Did you call me here just to mess around with me? Are you retarded? Even if I was genuinely working with Hysteria, do you think I would admit it? Also, I have suspicions that it's actually you who is working with Hysteria. Do you have any proof to say otherwise? Ling Han asked in a firm voice. Feng Wuding immediately jumped up and roared, Are you trying to smear me? Ling Han chuckled and said, I haven't even accused you of smearing me yet. Why are you getting all worked up? Ling Han. Feng Wuding spat through gritted teeth. He truly wanted to charge forward to attack him. Looking at his seething expression, and then looking at Ling Han's calm and composed manner, the others couldn't help but shake their heads. Even though Feng Wuding was the son of destiny from the Genesis world of the last era, his mental cultivation was truly very lacking. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, What, you want to fight? Ling Han. Xian Chihu finally said, There's no smoke without fire. Simply denying the accusation won't resolve the issue. Moreover, if this issue isn't resolved comprehensively, who will still dare to trust you in the future? Who will dare to battle alongside you? These words were far more refined, and they were standing on the side of righteousness. Thus, Ling Han definitely couldn't brush them aside with a simple denial. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Oh, how do you want me to prove my innocence? Perhaps I'll revert to my true form if you people refine me for a while. According to the experiences of the 7th tier heavenly venerates who have battled against Hysteria for countless years, Hysteria possesses the ability to engulf one's life essence. This is also why it was able to overtake everyone else and become the most powerful 7th tier. Xianqihu looked at Ling Han and continued, If you also possess such an ability, then it's clear that there's a relationship between you and Hysteria. He didn't directly accuse Ling Han of being Hysteria's subordinate. Instead, he was trying to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was a relationship between Ling Han and Hysteria. After that, it would only be a matter of time before Ling Han was nailed onto a pillar of shame. Comparing Xian Chihu to Feng Wuding, it was abundantly clear just how much more scheming and experienced the former was. Meanwhile, Feng Wuding appeared like nothing more than a mere child. Bring him over, Xian Chihu said with a wave of his hand. A person was immediately dragged over. Their cultivation was sealed, and they were only a measly 8th heaven celestial king. Pa! Xian Chihu's movements were lightning quick as he smashed the celestial king into smithereens. Everyone was astonished. Even though this person was only an 8th heaven celestial king, which was akin to trash in their eyes, seeing them being suddenly killed in such a bloody manner was still enough to make their mind shudder. This celestial king committed a great crime, so there's no need to pity his death, Xian Chihu said in explanation. Everyone, carefully observe his life essence. They all nodded before observing the celestial king's life essence with their divine sense. In the next instant, expressions of shock spread across their faces. Like in front of a thirsty horse lapping water, all the life essence was surging toward Ling Han. Gasp! Ling Han had the same ability as Hysteria. Was he truly a subordinate of Hysteria? Chapter 2944 2944 Universally Condemned. Chapter 2944 2944 Universally Condemned. 2944 Universally Condemned. Ling Han was also slightly annoyed. Being able to engulf life essence to raise his cultivation was indeed a very astonishing and useful ability. However, this was also something that he couldn't control at all. Right now, everyone's gaze was locked onto him, and even those who had been undecided before were now looking at him with expressions of contempt and disgust. He was Hysteria's subordinate, so he was naturally despised by all. Ling Han, do you have anything else to say? Feng Wuding asked with a smug expression. Ling Han shrugged and said, So what if this is the case? It's just a coincidence. You're trying to say this is a coincidence? Feng Wuding said with a humph. Then why don't I have the same ability? How would I know? Because you're an utter fool? Ling Han casually replied. You! Feng Wuding was on the verge of exploding in fury. Xian Chihu waved a hand and said, Ling Han, you're also a fellow commander, so we won't make our judgment so quickly. However, this matter is of great importance, so it's vital that you cooperate with us. Right now, you need to give up all resistance and surrender yourself. As for whether you're genuinely a subordinate of Hysteria or not, this will naturally be determined by the 7th tier Heavenly Venerates. Ling Han looked at Xian Chihu. This person was truly old and scheming. He was clearly trying to capture him, yet he was making it seem as if he were doing everything for the greater good. Everyone, Lin Yolian suddenly said. Before accusing Ling Han of being Hysteria's subordinate, have you ever thought about how many enemies he's killed up until now? If he's genuinely Hysteria's subordinate, why would he do this? Many people instantly nodded in agreement. Ling Han had indeed killed countless members of Hysteria's army these past few years. In fact, at least a third of the intelligent monsters had been killed by him. Otherwise, their front lines would have definitely had to retreat an unfathomable distance. It was truly hard to believe that Ling Han was a traitor. If he hadn't done this, how could he have won our trust? Nalin Xiong said, That's right. All of this was definitely part of his plan. The destruction that he can bring to the Flaming Frost Realm and the Genesis world is definitely far greater than the damage that he's brought to Hysteria's army, someone else said. Moreover, if it weren't because of his identity as Hysteria's subordinate, how could he have marched through Hysteria's army with such ease? Someone else added. Even though Lord Xian, Lord Lin, and Lord Wu are all more powerful than Ling Han, none of them are able to do this. So be it if Ling Han only managed to do it a single time. However, he was able to do it tens of thousands of times. Is Hysteria's army truly that helpless against him? Indeed. Everyone nodded in agreement. Ling Han was indeed freakish, but in reality his battle prowess was still slightly inferior to that of Lord Xian, Lord Lin, and Lord Wu. Even the three of them were unable to march through Hysteria's army with ease. So why was Ling Han able to do it? Moreover, he was able to do it tens of thousands of times. Was there truly nothing suspicious about this? Who would believe it? That's right. Why was Ling Han able to do that? He was definitely coordinating with Hysteria's army, and they definitely went easy on him on purpose. How detestable. If Ling Han continued to kill them like this, his reputation and prestige would definitely soar higher and higher. If he truly became our leader, we would be killed without even knowing what hit us. Everyone exploded in anger. Bai Meifan and Xian Feng were both infuriated. As members of the guerrilla strike force, just how many dangers had they faced? Had they not witnessed this with their own eyes? Moreover, a traitor did indeed exist. However, that was Fu Yuan, not Ling Han. They tried to speak up for Ling Han, yet their voices were immediately drowned out by the seething and ferocious criticisms being launched toward him. Ling Han didn't get angry. In fact, he had already anticipated this result. He simply looked at Xian Chihu. He had fought with Xian Chihu many times, and Xian Chihu was one of the few people who knew about his trump card. He could tear apart space and freely travel between dimensions. It was because of this that he was able to march through Hysteria's army with ease. To his disappointment, however, Xian Chihu didn't speak up to explain this. This person always adhered to the principle of justice. However, they weren't facing Hysteria's army right now, so no one could blame Xian Chihu for not speaking up. In the future, he could simply say that he had forgotten about Ling Han's ability. Capture him! Everyone roared in fury. They were all filled with rage and indignance. When on the battlefield, what were they most afraid of? The answer was naturally being stabbed in the back by their own ally. Ling Han, if you still have a sense of justice in your heart, then give up your resistance and surrender yourself. Whether you're guilty or innocent will naturally give you a fair trial, Chihu said calmly. Feng Wuding wore a cold smile as he watched on. Ling Han was already unable to turn the tables. He was a traitor. He was the Flaming Frost Realm's enemy. What did it matter how powerful Ling Han was? What did it matter that he had been defeated by Ling Han before? Wasn't Hysteria even more freakish? It was able to suppress all of the 7th tier heavenly venerates by itself. But what did this matter? Would anyone worship Hysteria? Would anyone belittle the 7th tier heavenly venerates simply because they were weaker than Hysteria? This same principle also applied to him, Feng Wuding. Ling Han sighed upon seeing this. Were they really going to force him to do something? Lin Yulian opened her mouth again, saying, We need to consider this matter more carefully. Ling Han is one of the 5 commanders, and his battle prowess is also astonishing. Everyone has witnessed his great contributions. Yet, you want to capture him because of a few rumors and random coincidences. This isn't just. Lin Yulian, that's where you're wrong. Everything that's related to Hysteria has to be treated with utmost caution and seriousness. Otherwise, just how terrifying will the consequences be? It's simply unimaginable, Chihu said in a stern voice. As for whether Ling Han is guilty or not, the 7th tier elites will naturally be able to figure this out. He was focusing on one argument, and that was the fact that they had to treat everything related to Hysteria with utmost seriousness. Since Ling Han was suspected of being Hysteria's subordinate, they naturally had to treat this case in such a manner as well. They would rather wrongly accuse someone than wrongly exonerate someone. Most people supported this position. Capture him. Capture him. Capture him. Their roars were like crashing waves that rose one after another. Ling Han, kneel and surrender yourself. Feng Wuding said with a smug expression. He was truly in control of everything at this moment. Weakling, intoxicated by success. Bai Meifan couldn't help but curse. Ling Han glanced at Feng Wuding and said, If you want a beating, then come over here. I'll make sure to beat you until you're satisfied. Then let's hold a vote, Lin Yulian said as she looked at Wu Haoyang. She was confident that Wu Haoyang would support her. At that time, it would be 2 votes to 2 again. Even if they ignored Ling Han's vote, they would still have no option but to put the matter aside for the time being. Chihu smiled, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he said, I feel like everyone deserves a say on this, so it should be voted on by everyone. What do you all say? Yes, that's exactly right. We also want to vote. That's right. Trying to force me to battle alongside a spy and a traitor? How could I feel at ease? If Ling Han isn't captured, then I'll have no option but to leave. I agree. I also agree. Everyone nodded in approval. They couldn't accept Ling Han walking free. Chihu shook his head at Lin Yulian, saying, Lin Yulian, it's best that we respect everyone's opinion. Otherwise, how can we lead a disunited and demoralized army? There was hesitation on Lin Yulian's face. Chapter 2945, 2945 Exchange of Blows. Chapter 2945, 2945 Exchange of Blows. 2945 Exchange of Blows. It went without saying that it would be a terrible idea to offend the masses. Lin Yulian possessed a battle prowess at the 6th tier, and she could easily suppress any single person beneath the platform. If they teamed up, however, they would be powerful enough to stop her in her tracks. Moreover, Chihu wasn't weaker than her, and Feng Wuding was only slightly weaker than her. Thus, she couldn't do as she pleased. If she insisted on supporting Ling Han, this would potentially cause the Flaming Frost Army to fracture and collapse. Such a consequence would be far too severe. What should I do? Even though she was usually calm and composed, she couldn't help but feel at a loss at this moment. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Very well. If you want to capture me, then come over here. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Ling Han, you're far too selfish. If you choose to resist, won't that be hurting our alliance and helping our enemies?" Xian Chihu said loudly, his face filled with righteousness. Holy fuck! Ling Han truly wanted to kill Xian Chihu at this moment. Even at this moment, this person was still playing his little games. It looked like he was trying to persuade Ling Han, but in reality, he was actually adding fuel to the fire. He was igniting everyone's emotions. If Ling Han truly killed someone, here even if his innocence was proven at a later date, how could he ever be forgiven? In fact, it was extremely likely that no one would even continue to investigate the reality of the situation. At that time, he would suffer injustice forever. There was hysteria pressuring them from the outside, and there was Xian Chihu causing trouble from the inside. Were they trying to force him into a dead end? Whoosh! A figure suddenly descended at this moment, radiating with a profound aura that suppressed all matter. Everyone looked over, and they involuntarily shuddered. They hurriedly bowed and said, "Our respects to Lord Zhou." This person was none other than Zhou Heng. Lin Yulian breathed a sigh of relief. When Ling Han had arrived yesterday, she had already informed Zhou Heng, Lin Xiaoyang, and the others of the situation. Even though Zhou Heng had arrived slightly later than desired, his status as a 6th-tier heavenly venerate was more than enough to suppress everyone. Zhou Heng nodded in acknowledgement and gestured for everyone to get up. By comparing Zhou Heng's aura to Lin Yulian's, it was clear that the former was far superior, even though they both possessed a battle prowess at the 6th tier. This was because he wasn't an ordinary 6th tier. Instead, he was a supremely powerful elite who might advance to the 7th tier at any moment. Even though Zhou Heng's cultivation level was being suppressed here, he most likely still wouldn't lose to Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang, the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity. After all, as someone who had the right to become a 7th tier, was he not one of the most paramount prodigies? Was the pinnacle cultivation level not the 7th tier? As expected of one of the strongest 6th tier heavenly venerates, he was able to immediately control the situation. Ling Han is indeed one of the seeds chosen by hysteria, Zhou Heng continued. Everyone had only just calmed down, yet their intense emotions were immediately reignited. They had only been suspicious just then, but would a 6th tier elite lie to them? This was especially the case since it was Zhou Heng, a super elite, who had the right to advance to the 7th tier. Kill him. That's right. We definitely have to kill this spy. Otherwise, who knows what abominable crime he'll commit. Kill him. Kill him. Zhou Heng held up a hand, and everyone instantly fell silent again. However, Chu Hao, Lin Xiaoyang, and I already knew about this quite a while ago. We also investigated Ling Han's mind, and we can guarantee that he's already erased the mark that hysteria left behind. He's got no relationship with hysteria. Everyone became hesitant and indecisive upon hearing this. On one side, there was solid and indisputable evidence, while on the other side, there was Zhou Heng, a supremely powerful figure. In fact, there was even Lin Xiaorong and Chu Hao, 2 6th-tier elites. One had to realize that Chu Hao was also someone who had the right to advance to the 7th tier. The 3 of them were vouching for Ling Han right now, so who dared to question them? Who dared to disrespect their stance? At the very least, no one here dared to oppose them. This was the case for Wu Haoyang, Xian Chihu, and Feng Wuding. Lord Zhou, don't be tricked by him, Feng Wuding said, not willing to give up. Ling Han was already on the verge of being nailed to the pillar of shame, yet Zhou Heng's arrival had quickly turned the situation on its head. Was Ling Han going to be rescued just like this? No, Feng Wuding definitely couldn't accept this. Everyone nodded in agreement. Even though Zhou Heng was extremely powerful, Hysteria was even more powerful than him. Thus, it wouldn't be surprising if Zhou Heng and the others failed to detect Hysteria's tricks. Lord Zhou, you shouldn't sacrifice your brilliant reputation for the sake of Ling Han, someone said. However, they were hidden in the crowd, and they didn't reveal their identity. Ling Han swept his gaze across the room. This person was extremely sinister, and he was purposely trying to drag Zhou Heng's name through the mud. Perhaps he was Huangfu Dongyue's companion. However, it was a shame that this person was hidden too well. Everyone here was a heavenly venerate, so their powerful and varied auras made it extremely difficult to pinpoint this person. Someone suddenly appeared and said, "Ha! I'm also of the same opinion." He was also radiating with a profound and domineering aura. This was another 6th tier, heavenly venerate. Yu Borong. Ling Han furrowed his brows. Zhou Heng's arrival was naturally good news. However, Yu Borong's arrival was the complete opposite. Yu Borong glanced at Ling Han, not concealing his powerful killing intent, as he said, "Since he's suspected of being in cahoots with Hysteria, we have to capture and execute him. It's better that we wrongly execute someone than wrongly exonerate someone." "Fuck you, you old dog." Hunyo immediately jumped up and said, "Old man, what nonsense are you spewing? You dare to disrespect me?" Yu Borong said coldly. He launched a palm strike at Hunyo. "You're seeking death." Ling Han roared. His gaze was cold as he leaped forward and threw a punch. Pum! Yu Borong's attack was immediately blocked. However, Ling Han didn't stop, and he continued to charge at Yu Borong. "Old man, you really think that you can do as you please?" In terms of true battle prowess, Yu Borong was definitely more powerful than Ling Han. However, this place would suppress one's cultivation level, so those who were at the 6th tier would also be suppressed to the 5th tier. In that case, just how powerful would Yu Borong still be? Even if he were a freak who could overcome the barrier to the 6th tier, while still at the peak stage of the 5th tier, the most his battle prowess could reach was still only the early stage of the 6th tier. As for Ling Han, he could reach the middle stage of the 6th tier. Thus, Ling Han would naturally have an advantage. Pung, pung, pung. After a flurry of furious exchanges, Yu Borong had no option but to retreat continuously. This caused him to roar in rage. He was a mighty 6th tier elite. Moreover, he had come here in a haughty and domineering manner for no other reason than to capture Ling Han. But now, Ling Han was actually forcing him to retreat. He was being humiliated in front of everyone. "Just who do you think you are? You actually dared to attack my wife?" Ling Han said coldly. His attacks became even more furious. "That's right. What right do you have to attack Nyo?" Hunyo fumed, with her hands on her hips. Everyone was rendered speechless. Hunyo hadn't been hurt at all, and it was instead Yu Borong who was being completely suppressed by Ling Han. If anyone were to feel furious, it should have been Yu Borong. Yu Borong roared in rage as he used a trump card, boosting himself with a 2nd-grade seal as he unleashed an attack at Ling Han. However, this was utterly useless. Ling Han was someone who possessed a 1st-grade seal. He had already enjoyed an advantage before, so after boosting himself with the heavenly venerable seal, he became even more powerful and domineering. Yu Borong was unable to counterattack, and he could only continue to retreat as he was pummeled by Ling Han. Chapter 2946. 2946 Arrival of the Mighty Figures. Chapter 2946. 2946 Arrival of the Mighty Figures. 2946 Arrival of the Mighty Figures. Fortunately, Yu Borong was a 6th tier elite. Even though his cultivation level was suppressed, his body had been tempered by 5 different types of fundamental power before. This was something that wouldn't become weaker. Thus, he could easily withstand Ling Han's attacks. It was just that he would feel a little uncomfortable. 6th tier elites were far more powerful than 5th tier elites. Even though Yu Borong was at a huge disadvantage, he still had a chance to turn the tables on Ling Han. If he could exhaust Ling Han's heavenly venerable seals, and if he still had some remaining, he could rely on them to overcome the gap in power between them. At that time, he could perhaps achieve victory. Of course, he definitely couldn't imagine that Ling Han possessed a whopping 300 or so heavenly venerable seals. Thus, trying to exhaust his heavenly venerable seals, could he truly withstand Ling Han's relentless attacks for so long? Zhou Heng watched on, not showing any signs of wanting to interfere. Since he didn't interfere, Lin Yolian, Xian Chihu, and Feng Wuding naturally couldn't interfere either. Otherwise, wouldn't they be disrespecting a 6th-tier elite? Only when Yu Borong became bruised and battered did Zhou Heng finally say, "Ling Han, that's enough. This is Lord Yu Borong, your senior." Ling Han stepped back and said, "Understood, Senior Zhou." Everyone was rendered speechless. They were clearly doing this on purpose. Zhou Heng could have stopped Ling Han a long time ago, yet he insisted on waiting until Yu Borong was beaten to a pulp to stop him. His intention was as clear as day. Yu Borong was extremely disheveled as he huffed and puffed. He was huffing and puffing in pure rage. He glared at Ling Han, and it was as if flames were about to burst from his eyes. This was utter humiliation. He was a mighty 6th-tier elite, yet he had been viciously pummeled before so many people. How could he endure this? However, what could he do? Fight again? But he couldn't defeat Ling Han. Ling Han was clearly at the 4th tier, yet he still couldn't rival him. Thus he could only endure this. Ling Han looked at Yu Borong and said, "I'm truly sorry for offending you, Senior Yu." He even clasped his hands in apology. Yu Borong's expression was extremely dark. He had arrived with arrogance, yet he was now being forced to swallow his anger. This made him lose all his face. He took a deep breath. He definitely couldn't allow himself to be manipulated by Zhou Heng and Ling Han. Right now, the most important thing was to indict Ling Han. Enough with the nonsense. "I want to capture Ling Han, so what do you say?" he said as he looked squarely at Zhou Heng. "I already said." Ling Han explained his situation to Senior Brother Lin, Junior Brother Chu, and me a long time ago. All three of us examined his mind, and we concluded that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, Zhou Heng replied calmly. However, his voice was incredibly firm. 3 6th-tier heavenly venerates had reached a consensus on this, so who could change their minds? "Zhou Heng, are you hell-bent on shielding this traitor?" Yu Borong asked in a baleful voice. "The investigation hasn't finished yet, so don't speak in such a categorical manner," Zhou Heng said. He appeared especially calm and composed, and he continued, "In any case, Ling Han isn't a traitor. He wasn't in the past, he isn't in the present, and he won't be in the future." "Ha! Brother Zhou, are your words not a little too exaggerated?" someone said with a chuckle. They looked over, only to see a man walking over. No one saw where he came from, and it was as if he had always been here. Zhou Heng involuntarily became tense, and he said, 10,000 shadows! The 10,000 shadows heavenly venerate a 6th tier. "I'm also of the opinion that things and people can change," another voice said. This was a white-haired old man. His body was covered in crimson scales, and there was also a 3-meter-long tail protruding from his back. Golden silk moth. Zhou Heng's expression became even more solemn. The golden silk moth heavenly venerate was also a 6th tier heavenly venerate. It was said that his true body was that of a golden silk moth, and after becoming a heavenly venerate, he started to undergo a series of transformations. He became a snake, then a wolf, then a tiger, then an elephant, then a phoenix, and then a dragon. If he transformed again, he would advance to the 7th tier and become the most powerful in the world. This was a supremely powerful opponent, and even Zhou Heng didn't dare to say that he could defeat him with confidence. After all, the golden silk moth, heavenly venerate, was also a profoundly talented person who was only a small step away from advancing to the 7th tier. The reason the golden silk moth, Heavenly Venerate, appeared so old was because his golden silk moth cultivation method could truly cause him to die. However, when his corpse became a cocoon, what would emerge from it would be his body, which had undergone 7 transformations. Thus, the older he looked, the more terrifying he would be. I also agree that we should capture him and carefully search his soul, the golden silk moth, Heavenly Venerate, said. Zhou Heng suppressed his anger and said, "The mind is extremely important, yet it's also incredibly fragile. Searching Ling Han's soul will inevitably damage his mind and affect his future growth. So what? Is this not what we should do to weed out the spies of hysteria?" Yu Borong asked. "Weed out you, Mom?" Ling Han wanted to curse at him, yet he could only suppress his urge after seeing the signal in Zhou Heng's eyes. "Since we're unable to reach a consensus, we can only invite the 7th tier elites over," Zhou Heng said, unleashing his trump card. Not every 6th tier Heavenly Venerate had the support of a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate. At the very least, Yu Borong, the golden silk moth Heavenly Venerate, and the 10,000 shadows Heavenly Venerate didn't. Zhou Heng released a special signal. In just an instant, a terrifying aura descended from the sky. A 7th tier elite had arrived. This was naturally Lin Luo, and it was only one of his doppelgangers that had arrived. However, being a mighty 7th tier elite, even his doppelganger was powerful enough to suppress most 6th tier elites. If Lin Luo's true self arrived, even the unique environment here wouldn't be able to suppress his cultivation. 7th tier elites had already jumped out from this world and truly achieved transcendence. Thus, they would be able to wield their full power no matter where they were, even in transcendent dimensions. However, this was only a doppelganger, so it naturally couldn't be so powerful. Its cultivation level was also suppressed to the 5th tier. Everyone bowed and said, "Our respects to Lord Lin." Even Zhou Heng, the 10,000 shadows Heavenly Venerate, and the others bowed in respect. 7th tier Heavenly Venerates represented heaven and earth, represented true meaning, and represented all matter. Lin Luo nodded in acknowledgement. However, he faltered just as he was just about to speak. Whoa! More terrifying auras descended. 1, 2, 3. They were all the doppelgangers of 7th tier elites. Xian Fu, Chongyan, and Shatter Mountains. "Brother Lin, it's better to capture him," Xian Fu said. "Fuck!" Ling Han cursed in his mind. He then looked at Xian Chihu. It was possible that Xian Fu had been called over by him. Lin Luo glanced at him and said, "I believe there's a huge chance that Ling Han will be the key to comprehensively defeating hysteria in the future. As such, we should put our absolute trust in him and help him reach the 7th tier as soon as possible. Reach the 7th tier and help hysteria attack us." Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said with a sneer. He had come from a different generation and different realm than Lin Luo, so he didn't show an iota of respect toward him. "There's no need to say anything else. We already have a candidate who can defeat hysteria, and that person is Feng Wuding," he loudly proclaimed. It was as if he were rectifying Feng Wuding's name. It didn't matter that he had been defeated by Ling Han. After all, Ling Han was hysteria's subordinate. Thinking about this carefully, however, it was quite a hilarious proposition. If Ling Han were genuinely hysteria's subordinate, then how could Feng Wuding defeat hysteria if he couldn't even defeat one of its subordinates? Oh, he couldn't even deal with an underling, yet he could kill the more powerful boss. What an absolute joke. "I say that we should kill him," Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said in a baleful voice. Chapter 2947. 2947 7th Tiers Making Their Move. Chapter 2947. 2947 7th Tiers Making Their Move. 2947 7th Tiers Making Their Move. "I concur," the Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate said. "Concur your mom." Ling Han grumbled in his mind. However, he kept his mouth shut. Lin Luo was standing up for him right now, so he would wait to see if the 7th tier Heavenly Venerate could resolve the problem for him. It would naturally be best if he could resolve the situation. In case he couldn't, however, Ling Han had no intention of standing still and waiting to be captured. Everyone's cultivation would be suppressed here, so unless a 7th tier elite came over with their true body, Ling Han wouldn't be afraid of anyone. In fact, even if a 7th tier elite did come, Ling Han could still tear apart space and leave. In the void, only hysteria was powerful enough to rival him. Thus, Ling Han was extremely calm at this moment as he contemplated something else. It was naturally easy for him to leave. However, what about the others? Ling Shi and Ling Jinshua were still claiming new territory in the profound negative realm, so it would be impossible for Ling Han to take them with him. If he left, what would happen to his son and daughter? However, thinking about it a bit more, even though Lin Luo, Zhou Hong, and the others were unable to defend him, using a bit of their power to protect his children would only be a very minor matter. After all, there was a reason to target Ling Han, but there was no reason to target Ling Shi, Ling Jinshua, and the others, who would dare to disregard the words of 7th tier elites. The same could be said for the Rain Emperor and the others. This was even more so the case for Bai Meifan. His grandpa was a 7th tier elite, so who dared to target him? With this in mind, Ling Han finally let go of his worries. If it really came to it, he would simply leave. But where would he go? That would naturally be the Genesis world of the last era. If he truly needed to flee, he would have heaps of time on his hand to explore those ancient dimensions. Lin Luo argued strongly on good grounds, and he even offered to use his own reputation to vouch for Ling Han. If something went wrong, he would shoulder the full responsibility. However, Chongyan and Shatter Mountains didn't give him an inch. They had both come from the Genesis world of the last era, so why did they need to care about Lin Luo's feelings? Ling Han had to die. Ling Han suspected that this was all because of Feng Wuding. If Ling Han didn't die, then Feng Wuding would forever be seen as a failure. He would always be inferior to Ling Han. Was this conflict being perpetuated by a power struggle between the new and old Genesis world? Ling Han had strong suspicions that Chongyan and Shatter Mountains were fanning the flames on purpose, with their intention being to kill him, the strongest prodigy in the current Genesis world. There's nothing else to say. Capture him. Chongyan said coldly. Friend, you're taking things too far. Lin Luo said coldly. He was a 7th tier elite, someone whose words were more powerful than the heavens. No one had ever defied him before. Yet these people were opposing him even after he made a Dao oath to vouch for Ling Han. He was genuinely enraged at this moment. Disposing of spies and traitors is the righteous decision. Friend Lin, are you being a little too selfish? The Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate said as he reached over to grab Ling Han. Lin Luo immediately stepped forward. Yet Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen also stepped forward, blocking his path. Old bastard, I've already put up with you for too long. Ling Han roared as he charged at the Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate. Pum! The two of them exchanged a blow. The Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate shuddered slightly, while Ling Han spat blood as he flew through the air. This was the power of a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate. Even though this was only a doppelganger whose cultivation had been suppressed, he was still unfathomably powerful. However, everyone exclaimed in astonishment, all of them feeling that Ling Han was as freakish as could be. His true cultivation level was only at the 4th tier. Yet he had only suffered some minor injuries after facing the attack of a 7th tier elite head-on. This was simply incredible. You're this powerful now, so just how powerful will you be in the future? We definitely can't spare you, the Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate said, his expression changing slightly. However, he didn't feel any shame that he was picking on a 4th tier Heavenly Venerate. nor did he feel any disappointment that he had failed to kill him with a single strike. He was a 7th-tier elite, the most powerful in the world. What did he need to care about? In his eyes, achieving his goal was the only matter of importance. Die! He charged over again, his attacks extremely vicious as he tried to kill Ling Han. Ling Han released a battle cry as he channeled a heavenly venerable seal, unleashing his fists of fury to face the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate head-on. He was filled with boundless rage. He was innocent, so why did he have to face such unfair treatment? Were they all blind? Could they not see the contributions he had made to the Flaming Frost realm all these years? Some of them were being willfully blind, and their intention was to kill him. This was for no other reason than jealousy or personal grudges. This was utterly detestable and disgraceful. With such short-sightedness, it was no wonder the Genesis world of the last era had only been able to severely wound hysteria, even after sacrificing its entirety. It had failed to solve the root of the problem. As for this generation, perhaps Ling Han would become powerful enough to kill hysteria in the future. However, if he were killed now, there would naturally be no more future. Taking a step back, even if they only searched his soul and found him to be innocent, what would happen if he were injured during this process? One's mind and divine sense were incredibly important, and these were critical factors that would affect one's future potential. Thus, receiving injuries to these would be equivalent to destroying his future. Old bastard, did I trample on your grandpa's grave, or did I kill your father? Ling Han said. He was furious at this moment, so he wouldn't feel good unless he vented his anger. Don't think that you're invincible and undying. When my battle prowess reaches the 7th tier, I'll make sure to suppress you and trap you under a toilet. I'll have you stink for all eternity. As a 7th tier elite, the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate's temperament was naturally extremely calm and composed. He wouldn't be affected by such trivial curses. Why was this? This was because his supreme power meant that no one dared to disrespect him. Even if someone did, he could kill them with a single strike. As such, he wouldn't even have the opportunity to become angry. However, this was only his doppelganger, and his cultivation had also been suppressed as well. Thus, he was unable to suppress Ling Han no matter what. This caused him to become increasingly angry, with his brows knitting into a frown. How can there be such a detestable person? His mouth is far too toxic. Yet, there was nothing the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate could do about Ling Han's trump cards. He was only a doppelganger, so he couldn't channel all of the abilities of his true body, such as heavenly venerable seals. If this were in the outside world, he could rely on his superior cultivation level to suppress Ling Han. Here, however, he was only slightly more powerful than ordinary 6th-tier elites. Thus, he was completely unable to suppress his opponent. Seeing the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate fail to defeat Ling Han after so long, a look of astonishment involuntarily spread across heavenly venerate Chongyan's face. This brat was going to defy the heavens. Chongyan, you can also see, Ling Han's potential is limitless, and it's extremely likely that he's the only person who can defeat hysteria in the future, Lin Luo said. Since Ling Han was temporarily safe, he naturally didn't need to be too worried. Heavenly venerate Chongyan humphed and said, "We can't even determine whether he's an ally or an enemy. Who knows if he's a subordinate of hysteria? A single hysteria is already so difficult to deal with. So what will we do if he gains another 7th-tier helper?" In any case, we still have Feng Wuding, the son of destiny from the Genesis world of the last era. Hearing his name, Feng Wuding involuntarily stood up a little straighter, making himself seen. Lin Luo simply chuckled in reply. "What's with that expression? What are you trying to say?" Feng Wuding was instantly driven mad. Was he being looked down upon? "You want to kill me? One of you isn't enough. In fact, no number of you will be enough." Ling Han roared. He unleashed a battle cry as he channeled all of his 8th grade seals at once, causing his power to grow 1,000-fold. Chapter 2948. 2948 Obliterating the Doppelganger of a 7th Tier. Chapter 2948. 2948 Obliterating the Doppelganger of a 7th Tier. 2948 Obliterating the Doppelganger of a 7th Tier. To have one's power increase 1,000-fold. Just what kind of concept was this? At the very least, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger couldn't block it. This was only a doppelganger, after all, and its cultivation had also been suppressed. It would have been more shocking if it could rival Ling Han's explosive power. Pung! The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger was instantly sent flying. As his body shuddered, there was also a pulsating glow, and it was as if he were becoming less tangible. This was because his doppelganger wasn't a fleshly body, and it was instead formed from the fundamental power of the Genesis world. As such, it naturally wouldn't spit blood. However, Ling Han's formidable attack almost caused him to crumble. To the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate, having his doppelganger destroyed wouldn't be a big deal. However, he had arrived in such a haughty manner, yet he was now going to be obliterated by a measly 4th tier Heavenly Venerate? Just how preposterous would that be? With this in mind, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate roared and forcefully stabilized his body, causing it to glow in the process. He had used a single wisp of his divine sense and 6 fundamental powers to form this doppelganger. The most important component was his divine sense, and if it was destroyed, he would naturally be unable to regather the other fundamental powers. "Insolent brat, you actually dared to attack me!" he roared as he charged at Ling Han. However, while Ling Han's power had grown 1,000-fold, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate was unable to use any heavenly venerable seals. Thus, how could he rival Ling Han? Pung, pung, pung. He was sent flying again and again. Everyone was stunned, and they felt as if they were in a dream. That was a 7th tier elite. Even though it was only a doppelganger, it still shouldn't have been so weak. Attack you? That's right, my target is you. Ling Han held. He knew that he couldn't hurt the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate even if he destroyed his doppelganger. However, he could thoroughly humiliate him. Ling Han was eager with anticipation. Old bastard, you're using the fact that you're a 7th tier elite to bully me, right? Then come on, show me how you're going to bully me now. Everyone was speechless and transfixed with shock. In their eyes, 7th tier elites were invincible and omnipotent beings, yet the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate was actually defeated. Indeed, no excuse could change the fact that he had been defeated. Ling Han, I'll battle you. Foam Wooding roared as he charged over. You're not worthy of battling against a 7th tier elite. He was naturally trying to salvage some face for the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate. However, did he think they were all blind? Who hadn't seen the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate being beaten to a pulp? In any case, it was naturally beneath the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate to team up with Foam Wooding. He wanted to retreat, yet Ling Han continued to pursue him and attack, not allowing him to break free. Everyone became even more speechless. Foam Wooding had stepped in to help, yet the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate was still being suppressed by Ling Han anyway. This was truly humiliating. Foam Wooding was very powerful, but Ling Han was even more powerful. He wielded the power of 100 dimensions as he suppressed his opponents. These weren't projections, and they were genuine dimensions. Foam Wooding was absolutely stupefied. One had to realize that his limit was also hosting 100 dimensions. However, he had only managed to nurture 92 so far. As for Ling Han, he had directly unleashed 100 dimensions. Even if this were Ling Han's limit, it was still enough to draw a level with him. Foam Wooding thought extremely highly of himself, and his biggest trump card was none other than his 100 dimensions. Now, however, Ling Han had easily drawn level with him. How could he not feel despondent? Was he truly the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era? Die, you old bastard! Ling Han roared as he ferociously unleashed his fists of fury. He was going to obliterate his opponent with a single attack, not giving him the chance to recover and regroup. Insolence! Utter insolence! The Shatter Mountains, heavenly venerate, bellowed in fury. However, he was completely helpless as his body shuddered violently. With a crack, he eventually crumbled and disappeared. Everyone was stunned. They could barely believe their eyes. Seventh-tier elites were invincible. This was something that they had firmly believed. Now, however, this belief was crumbling before their eyes. Even though Ling Han had only managed to destroy the Shatter Mountains, Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger after teaming up with the restrictions of heaven and earth, everyone chose to ignore this point. They simply knew that a fourth-tier Heavenly Venerate had obliterated the doppelganger of a seventh-tier elite. In another layer of the realm battlefield, this was a dark and desolate place that seemed much like a void. However, the 10 most powerful people of the Genesis world were all gathered here now, engaged in an intense battle. Their opponent didn't show its true body. Instead, it continued to battle them with its countless tentacles, with each tentacle radiating with boundless power. In fact, these tentacles were so powerful that they could kill a sixth-tier elite with a single strike. This was the battlefield where the 10 supreme seventh-tier elites fought against the main body of Hysteria. It was also thanks to them that Hysteria was unable to focus more of its attention on creating new minions. This helped to reduce the pressure faced by those in the 2 other layers. This was especially the case after Chong Yen and the others had joined 100 million years ago. Even though they were still at a disadvantage, the extra reinforcements had indeed proved to be extremely helpful. However, a furious and earth-shattering bellow suddenly erupted. The Shatter Mountains, Heavenly Venerate, glowed with boundless brilliance, and it was as if even the heavens had to bow before him. Pung, pung, pung. His rage became tangible, causing the space around him to shatter. Insolent brat! He roared, an ice-cold expression in his eyes. He was naturally able to sense the destruction of his doppelganger, and this caused him to become wild with fury. He was a seventh-tier elite. A seventh-tier elite. No, he had to personally head over. He had to kill that brat. Calm down, Shatter Mountains, Lin Luo said. Don't forget our responsibility. The Shatter Mountains' Heavenly Venerate was beside himself with rage, and he roared, That brat destroyed my doppelganger! How can I forgive him? This was utterly humiliating. He was a seventh-tier elite. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen frowned and said, His potential is astounding, so if we allow him to develop, who can stop him in the future? We have to seize this opportunity to kill him, the Big Dipper Heavenly Venerate said coldly. Ahem. Mysterious Feather and Half Moon both nodded in agreement. They had all come from the Genesis world of the last era, so they were naturally of the same mind. I wholeheartedly disagree, Lin Luo immediately said. I also disagree, Bai Fan said with a shake of his head. Wu Jihong also shook his head in disagreement. However, he didn't speak. The Blood Rainbow Heavenly Venerate, the 4th, 7th tier Heavenly Venerate of the Flaming Frost Realm, also shook his head in disagreement. Brother Xian, what do you say? Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen asked as he looked at Xian Fu. He was confident that Xian Fu would agree with them to kill Ling Han. With 6 in favor and 4 against, things would naturally be settled in their favor. Xian Fu pondered for a moment before saying, I disagree. What? Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen and the others faltered upon hearing this. Hadn't Xian Fu dispatched a doppelganger to target Ling Han? So, why was he against killing Ling Han now? Had he taken the wrong medicine? Had he been beaten stupid by Hysteria? It was 5 votes to 5 now, so neither side was able to overcome the other. Humph. The Shatter Mountains Heavenly Venerate humphed, before suddenly turning around to leave. He was a 7th tier elite, someone who could only be suppressed but not killed. Moreover, Hysteria would only gain a slight advantage from this, which would allow it to focus a bit more attention on creating new subordinates. Thus, he could leave whenever he wanted to. He appeared as relaxed as could be. He could act on a whim, but Lin Luo and the others naturally couldn't. If they left, who would stop Hysteria? Moreover, allowing Hysteria to focus more on creating his army would only accelerate the destruction of the Flaming Frost Realm. Whoosh! Tearing open space, the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate flew off and vanished without a trace. Chapter 2949. 2949 Rage of a 7th Tier. Chapter 2949. 2949 Rage of a 7th Tier. 2949 Rage of a 7th Tier. Meanwhile, on Ling Han's side, Lin Luo's doppelganger suddenly said, "Ling Han, you should leave now." The Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate's true body was about to arrive, and even the dimensional suppression wouldn't be able to affect him. 7th tier heavenly venerates were unstoppable. Ling Han naturally understood what Lin Luo was trying to tell him. He had destroyed the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate's doppelganger, so his main body was going to charge over to vent his anger. Sigh, what a narrow-minded bastard. I've been wronged and bullied to such a degree. Yet have I flared up in rage yet? Ling Han leaped toward the Empress and Hunyao. Ling Han! Feng Wooding roared, finally coming to his senses at this moment. He had seen the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate's doppelganger being destroyed, so knowing the pride of 7th tier heavenly venerate, he knew that the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate would definitely charge over to kill Ling Han at all cost. Thus, he definitely couldn't allow Ling Han to flee. Of course, he didn't believe that Ling Han could flee from the grasp of a 7th tier elite anyway. He charged at Ling Han. Piss off! Ling Han said as he unleashed his power at Feng Wooding. Wow! He channeled his 100 dimensions, causing his power to increase 1,000-fold as he sent Feng Wooding flying with a single punch. His raw power, the heavenly venerable seals, and the number of his dimensions. Ling Han enjoyed an advantage in all 3 areas, so how could Feng Wooding possibly rival him? See you later, Ling Han said as he grabbed the Empress and Hunyao in his arms. Everyone, we'll definitely meet again in the future. Fiery Silk, Yu Borong, and 10,000 Shadows. I've remembered you 3. Of course, there's also you. His gaze became ice-cold as he pointed at Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen. Humph, you think you can escape? Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen sneered. His cultivation was suppressed, and he couldn't necessarily capture Ling Han. But obstructing him and preventing him from escaping wouldn't be too difficult. Once the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate arrived, Ling Han would be as good as dead. No, he had already become a dead person the moment that he destroyed the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate's doppelganger. If I want to leave, no one will be able to stop me, not you and not anyone else. Ling Han waved goodbye as he tore open the void. Where do you think you're going? Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen roared as he charged over. He thought that Ling Han was trying to teleport. Whoosh! Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen gave chase. However, to say nothing of the fact that he was only a doppelganger, he would lose his way in the void even if this were his true body. This was a domain that was beyond him. Not good, he exclaimed in his mind. Whoa! A devastating aura descended as the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate arrived. His power was far too terrifying, so much so that even the surrounding space trembled in his presence, teetering on the brink of shattering. Where's that insolent brat? He asked as he swept his gaze around. Lord Shatter Mountains. Ling Han tore open the void and fled. Lord Chong Yen is currently giving chase, Feng Wooding hurriedly replied. He's trying to teleport and flee? The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate said with a cold chuckle. Teleportation was a skill within the regulations. So how far could Ling Han flee? He immediately released his divine sense, and his overwhelming power as a 7th-tier elite allowed him to instantly observe every corner of the flaming frost realm. However, he didn't discover anything. What's going on? Don't tell me he directly teleported to another dimension. Is that still teleportation? Whoosh! He looked over, only to see Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen return at this moment. Without any dimensional coordinates, he had been forced to return the same way that he had left. This was the rule of the void, and this was something that even 7th-tier elites couldn't overcome. Where is he? The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate asked. That brat has the ability to travel between dimensions. He's fled, Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen replied. What? The Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate faltered upon hearing this. He then howled in boundless rage. Boom! His roar materialized into something tangible, its power so great that even the 6th-tier Heavenly Venerates felt pain in their chest, making them want to vomit blood. Meanwhile, blood flowed from all orifices of the Heavenly Venerates who were under the 6th tier. This was a harrowing sight. This was the terrifying might of a 7th-tier elite. However, everyone shook their head inwardly. It was understandable why the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate was so furious. His doppelganger had been destroyed in front of so many people, so how could he not go wild with rage? He had then come to kill Ling Han, yet he hadn't even been able to catch a glimpse of this insolent brat. Unable to vent his boiling anger, it was only natural that he bellowed to express his rage. However, he was a supremely powerful 7th-tier elite, so his bellows were truly difficult to endure for the others. Give chase. Immediately look for him, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate said coldly. We definitely have to find this traitor. I'm going to kill him with my own hands. Understood, everyone replied. They had no option but to comply. After all, this was a 7th-tier elite whose words were more powerful than the heavens. Ah! Still unable to suppress his rage, the Shatter Mountain's Heavenly Venerate unleashed 7 palm strikes toward Hysteria's army. Pum! The enemy encampment was instantly obliterated and flattened. Only then did he turn around to leave. Whoosh! He returned to the main battlefield. Everyone was left speechless after witnessing the profound might of a 7th-tier elite. Only after long while did they start to discuss this with spirit. So a 7th-tier elite is actually this powerful. Why don't they send a 7th-tier elite over here? If we have such a powerful elite, won't this place become impregnable? You're getting too ahead of yourself. Even though 7th-tier elites won't be suppressed by this dimension, their presence and power are so great that they'll end up causing damage to the dimension. No matter how many enemies they kill, they'll still end up providing more help to the enemy, thereby accelerating the advance of Hysteria. Moreover, the most important battlefield is the main battlefield. If they fail to obstruct Hysteria and allow it to charge over, the destruction of the Flaming Frost realm will be imminent. Then, should we look for Ling Han? Can you defeat Ling Han? No. Then there's your answer. Whoever can defeat him can go and look for him. What's the point of us going? To seek death? The task of looking for Ling Han could only be handed to the 6th-tier elites. Otherwise, the others wouldn't be able to make it back alive with the news, even if they managed to find him. Of course, this was assuming that Ling Han was truly Hysteria's subordinate. The problem was, if they didn't think that Ling Han was Hysteria's subordinate who would go and look for him. Thus, this task could only be left to the 6th-tier elites. Xian Chihu turned around and said, You guys stay here. I'm going to look for Ling Han. I'll go as well, Foam Wooding hurriedly said. No, we need 3 people to stay here, Xian Chihu said, rejecting his request. Foam Wooding still wanted to speak. However, he knew that he was weaker than Xian Chihu, so if only one of the 4 could go, Xian Chihu would naturally be more suitable. Lin Yulian and Wu Haoyang didn't oppose him. They didn't want to become enemies with Ling Han, and they more so didn't believe that he had betrayed the Genesis world. Thus, they naturally wouldn't volunteer to go. Xin Chihu set off, leaving the realm battlefield and heading to the Genesis world of the last era. He was certain that this was Ling Han's destination. Putting himself in Ling Han's shoes, this would definitely be the best place to hide and bide his time. Ling Han tore open the void and returned to the Genesis world. This was the profound negative realm, and he was going to look for his son and daughter first. He was going to ask for their opinions. However, both Ling Shi and Ling Jinxue wanted to stay in the profound negative realm. They wanted to continue their role of expanding its territory. Then be careful, Ling Han said with a nod. He respected his children's decision. Moreover, there were also Lin Luo, Zhou Heng, and the others to watch over them, so his children wouldn't be implicated because of him. Ling Han left with the Empress and Hunyao, heading directly to the Genesis world of the last era. This time he wanted to raise his battle prowess to the 7th tier, or perhaps even stronger. He would then return for vengeance. Chapter 2950 2950 Enemy of the World. Chapter 2950 2950 Enemy of the World. 2950 Enemy of the World. Ling Han was insanely quick, and he arrived in the Genesis world of the last era in just 7 years. In terms of traveling through the void, it was very likely that only Hysteria was quicker than him. Ling Han and his 2 wives immediately began to search for a spatial passageway that would take them to a deeper dimension. Once Ling Han's battle prowess reached the 7th tier, they would no longer need to go to so much trouble. He could directly charge down, ignoring the chaotic winds and origin flames. Those people are so detestable, Hunyao said with a pout. She placed her hands on her hips and continued, they actually dared to smear Niao's Ling Han. Niao is going to kill them all. She was extremely angry as she said this. In fact, she had never been an extremely kind person to begin with, and she had more so been as ferocious as a tiger when she had been young. The Empress glanced at her and said, "You're too weak, so you're merely speaking nonsense. Wayaya, you huge vixen, you actually dare to doubt Niao." Hunyao said in anger. The Empress simply replied with a chuckle. Nothing else needed to be said, and her intent was as clear as could be. Ling Han gestured for them to calm down. Of course, the 2 women had only been bickering, and there was nothing more to it than that. In fact, that wasn't too bad. At the very least, I was able to determine who's on my side and who wants me to die, Ling Han said. Also, we have enough time to look through this place now, Hunyao said with a giggle. Indeed, the Empress said with a nod. Otherwise, we'd be forced to battle against Hysteria's army in the realm battlefield. However, since they view us as traitors now, we naturally don't need to help them anymore. All right, I'll cultivate until my battle prowess reaches the 7th tier before leaving, Ling Han said with a hearty laugh. They arrived at the 13th dimension. They could only call this the 13th dimension and not the 13th layer because they had come here through a spatial passageway. Thus, they were unable to determine which layer this dimension belonged to. However, this didn't matter. What mattered was how much they could obtain from this place. The 3 of them kept an extremely low profile and remained extremely cautious. They were enemies of the entire world, after all, so they naturally couldn't expose their location. Otherwise, they would be hunted by the Shatter Mountain's heavenly venerate. At that time, Ling Han's only option would be death, regardless of how freakish he was. There were countless treasures here, but one needed to overcome many difficulties and also possess a good fortune to obtain them. Chaotic storms of energy swept through the dimension, filling every corner with danger. Even with battle prowess at the 6th tier, Ling Han still needed to be extremely careful. After all, his body had only been tempered by 3 fundamental powers, so his physique was still quite a long way off from reaching the 6th tier. This was quite an interesting quirk. In the past, Ling Han's physique had always been more powerful than his cultivation. Now, however, it was the opposite. The indestructible heaven scroll was already unable to keep up with his cultivation, and Ling Han didn't have any plan to raise it to the next level either. This was because the indestructible heaven scroll was subject to numerous limitations. It was created by a first-tier heavenly venerate, so it naturally didn't possess any information on the 6 fundamental powers. Moreover, to put it simply, the strength of a heavenly venerate was directly correlated to their mastery of the fundamental powers. Ling Han had a whole heap of time now, so he started to focus his concentration on cultivation. Since he didn't need to worry about the situation on the battlefield, Ling Han could naturally focus all of his attention on cultivation. He continued to search for veins of, or as he grew his strength. Following his slight advance in cultivation, the powers of dimension inside him also started to grow. He could now hold a maximum of over 200 dimensions. Thus, he needed to spend a lot of time to grow these dimensions to their full potential. If these dimensions grew a little, Ling Han's battle prowess would also grow a little. In the blink of an eye, over 4 million years passed. Ling Han's cultivation did indeed grow a little. However, he still had yet to reach the late stage of the 4th tier. There were far too few raw stone veins here. With the terrifying amount of energy that he needed to improve his cultivation, this lack of raw stone veins was completely unable to support him. Even so, his cultivation speed was indeed a little faster in this place. However, it was only faster to a limited extent. This was inevitable as the environment became increasingly hostile the deeper he traveled through the group of dimensions. The heaven and earth also became increasingly shattered. Thus, it was only natural that there were few heavenly venerable stones. However, even though there were fewer raw stones, the quality of each was higher. In fact, there were even 4th-grade heavenly venerable seals. If Ling Han ventured to the deeper dimensions, perhaps there would be 3rd grade, 2nd grade, or even 1st grade seals. Ling Han suddenly faltered at this moment. He could sense several auras rapidly moving toward them. Who is it? He didn't tear open the void to leave straight away. This was because the auras were powerful, but they were nowhere near the level of 7th-tier elites. He wasn't afraid of anyone under the 7th tier. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 11 people quickly appeared before Ling Han. In fact, it wasn't entirely accurate to refer to them as people. 8 of them were indeed people, but 3 of them were monsters with numerous arms, legs, and heads. 3 of Hysteria's creations, plus Huangfu Dongyue and the 7 other spies. Ling Han, you've already been abandoned by everyone in the Genesis world, Huangfu Dongyue said. Why don't you return to the main body? You're one of us, and you also have a spiritual mark left by the main body. We're countless times more noble than those fragile life forms. If you abandon your incorrect ways and adopt what is right, the main body is willing to forgive your crimes. Ling Han roared with laughter and said, All right then, I'll switch sides right away. Then return with me to the main body. There's something it wants to say to you, Huangfu Dongyue said. Ling Han scoffed and said, I'm not under Hysteria's control, and my battle prowess is also immense, far beyond its imagination. Is Hysteria getting anxious? Something to say to me? It merely wants to kill me and examine my corpse. Ling Han, what's the point of resisting? Huangfu Dongyue said, Have you forgotten about how you were treated by the others in the Genesis world? Ling Han nodded and replied, I naturally haven't forgotten who forced me into this situation. We were merely speaking the truth, Huangfu Dongyue said with a smile. Ling Han, there's nowhere else for you to go. Even 7th-tier elites are hunting you now, and once they find you, your only option will be death. With such a bright future, why do you insist on sticking with the Genesis world? Do they care that you were wronged? Will they empathize with you? Ling Han roared with laughter and said, It's been a few million years since I last saw you, and your eloquence has truly seen some improvement. Go back and tell Hysteria to clean its neck. I'll personally chop it off one day. Ling Han, what if Hysteria has several heads? Which neck do you want it to clean? Hunyo said with a giggle. Indeed, Ling Han said with a nod. Hearing this, Huangfu Dongwe didn't say anything else. It was clear that Ling Han possessed an extremely strong willpower and wouldn't be swayed by him. Then his only option was to battle. He couldn't help but sigh. This was the last resort, and it would be extremely difficult to stop Ling Han from traveling through the dimensions. Since you're unwilling to yield to Master, you'll ultimately be annihilated by Master's brilliance. Chapter 2951. 2951 Challenge at Every Step. Chapter 2951. 2951 Challenge at Every Step. 2951 Challenge at Every Step. Ling Han roared with laughter, saying, What dog *T brilliance? Come on, show me. Die. The 3 6th tier monsters charged over, with each of them unleashing their full strength. They were going to put Ling Han under so much pressure that he would have no time to tear open the void to flee. Unfortunately for them, Ling Han's strength had grown by a considerable amount during the past several million years, even though his cultivation hadn't improved by much. While he was still unable to rival those at the peak stage of the 6th tier, he could at the very least defend against them. Ling Han was at a disadvantage, but there was no need for him to worry about getting killed. Not in the short term, at least. Capture those two, Huangfu Dongyue said with a wave of his hand. He then charged toward the Empress and Hunyo with the 7 other people. Ling Han naturally wouldn't allow them to succeed. He forcefully broke free before drawing the Empress and Hunyo into the celestial guest residence. Standing tall and proud, he said, If you want to fight, then come at me. Ling Han, your treason will only lead to death. Huangfu Dongyue said. How noisy! Ling Han said with a humph. He then threw a powerful punch. Huangfu Dongyue naturally couldn't block this attack. However, the 3 6th tier monsters immediately stepped forward to block Ling Han's attack for him. Why struggle like this? Huangfu Dongyue asked with a smile. Once you return to the main body, you'll be able to obtain unfathomable power. At that time, you'll be able to crush those who dared to humiliate you under your feet. His words of persuasion naturally weren't sincere. Instead, he was purposely trying to shake Ling Han's will. Simply listening to him would affect Ling Han's battle prowess by a tiny bit. He was already at a disadvantage, so this small effect would be magnified into something much greater. However, Ling Han remained extremely calm and composed as he continued to swing his fists. From time to time, he would also release his 200 or so dimensions, and their power was so overwhelming that even the 3 6th tier monsters would be slightly affected. In fact, the 3 6th tier monsters would be less afraid of him if he directly used these dimensions as weapons. After all, shattering these dimensions would only be a matter of time. However, Ling Han was only using these dimensions to threaten them, and this made their situation far more difficult. Ling Han's quick release and retraction of these dimensions would cause their attacks to go awry and their reactions to become slow. This affected them greatly. At the same time, this also allowed Ling Han to continue his resistance. Otherwise, regardless of how freakish he was, he would still be unable to rival 3 monsters at the peak stage of the 6th tier. To say nothing of 3, he wouldn't even be able to rival 1. However, no matter how he resisted, the 3 6th tier monsters still maintained an absolute advantage. It wasn't long before Ling Han was riddled with wounds, falling into a precarious situation. Let's not play around anymore, Ling Han said in his mind. If he continued to battle, however, that wouldn't be testing his battle prowess anymore. Instead, that would be seeking death. Ling Han fled, and the 3 6th tier monsters gave chase. They were all lightning quick, with the boundless mountains and rivers being left far behind them. Interestingly, they would occasionally come to a screeching halt, and this was because they had to stop before the devastating storms of energy. Even 6th tier elites would be severely wounded if they tried to forcefully travel through these storms of energy. These storms didn't favor anyone, and they would stop Ling Han at some times, while they would stop the 3/6 tier monsters at other times. Broadly speaking, these storms were still relatively fair. Thus, the distance between them neither grew nor shrunk. Ling Han. A person suddenly appeared in front of Ling Han. Xianqihu. Without saying anything else, he directly launched an attack at Ling Han. Boom! This was a devastating attack unleashed by someone with a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 6th tier. Ling Han had no option but to engage in battle with Xianqihu. His body shuddered, and his internal organs were also in turmoil, causing him to feel extremely uncomfortable. It was also at this moment that the 3/6 tier monsters arrived. Boom! Even though these 3 monsters were Hysteria's subordinates, and even though they were hostile to all beings from the Genesis world, it was quite clear that they still understood what was more important. Right now, their attention and attacks were fully focused on Ling Han. What's wrong? Having an internal squabble? Xianqihu said as he unleashed another attack at Ling Han. However, he also unleashed an attack at the 3 monsters. Are you stalking me or something? Why do I see you everywhere? Ling Han said with a humph. He hurriedly stabilized his body, allowing his battle prowess to reach its full potential. He was being attacked by 4 6th tier elites now, so he was at an even greater disadvantage. Using his dimensions to buy a bit of time, he immediately turned around to flee again. Pum! 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 Xianqihu and the 3 6th tier monsters immediately gave chase, not forgetting to battle each other at the same time. This caused the situation to become incredibly chaotic. However, it also bought Ling Han more time to escape, allowing him to pull further and further away from his enemies. I'm genuinely disliked by both sides now, huh? Everyone wants to kill me, Ling Han murmured. However, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. The more pressure he was under, and the more unfairly he was treated, the more motivated he would become. This would allow him to dig even deeper to realize his potential. He cultivated in seclusion for a short time, digesting the comprehension that he had gained from the battle. This kind of life and death situation would allow him to gain the most enlightenment. He started to deduce the heavenly venerable seals. After reaching the 3rd tier, heavenly venerates would have the right to deduce heavenly venerable seals. Regarding how many of them could succeed and what grade of seals they would be able to deduce, this was a completely different matter altogether. Ling Han possessed far too many heavenly venerable seals right now, so he wanted to use a 7th grade seal that he already owned to deduce a neighboring seal. If he succeeded, he would be able to obtain more combination seals. This was far more useful than deducing a random seal. Why didn't he try to deduce a 1st grade seal? Just how difficult would that be? Perhaps he could succeed, but that would perhaps take 100 million years or even 1 billion years. Ling Han felt like improving his cultivation was more important. After 30,000 years, Ling Han successfully deduced a 3rd grade seal. If news of this traveled out, countless people's jaws would drop in shock. To deduce a heavenly venerable seal in just 30,000 years. I have far too many advantages. There are countless dimensions inside me, and they're already showing signs of growing into a Genesis world. Combined with the resonance with the other heavenly venerable seals and my comprehension from that battle, I only needed 30,000 years to deduce this heavenly venerable seal, Ling Han said to himself. Having fully digested the comprehension from his battle against the 4 6th tier elites, Ling Han chose to exit seclusion. He continued to look for raw stone veins, yet he discovered that this place was gradually becoming livelier and livelier, with more and more 6th tier elites arriving. Perhaps they were also here to look for raw stones, but if they encountered Ling Han, they definitely wouldn't mind unleashing a few attacks. Ling Han's situation became dire, with an enemy around almost every corner. This was because this broken dimension was far too small. Several years later, Ling Han found a spatial passageway that allowed him to enter a different dimension. He was most likely the first person to enter this dimension, as there was no sign of excavation in the surroundings. Perhaps I can advance to the peak stage of the 4th tier here. Ling Han immediately began to search for veins of ore. Chapter 2952. 2952 Endless Battles. Chapter 2952. 2952 Endless Battles. 2952 Endless Battles. Ling Han's luck began to turn for the better. He unearthed a great many raw stones that contained great herbs, which caused his cultivation level to finally begin to improve at a decent rate. At this rate, he would only need several 100,000 years to reach the peak stage of the 4th tier. The question was, were there so many great herbs here? Whatever, he would just try his best to mine all of them. The Empress and Hunyo both fully supported Ling Han. Their growth had already reached the limit, and the 4th tier was the end of their line. Perhaps they could advance to the 5th tier, but that would be a matter of who knew how many years. Hence, the great herbs that they mined would all be handed over to Ling Han so that he could break through to the 5th tier as soon as possible. Just like that, Ling Han's cultivation level slowly increased. After more than 2 million years, he finally reached the late stage of the 4th tier and was one step closer to the peak stage. However, right at this moment, the spatial passageway leading to this place had also been discovered. A great many elites barged in. They were not just limited to the heavenly venerates of the Flaming Frost realm. There were also Hysteria's subordinates among them. Ling Han. He had been discovered again. 7 of Hysteria's creations appeared, and every single one of them was exuding a terrifying aura, stronger than even Ling Han. 6th tier, they were all at the 6th tier, and they were all peak stage 6th tiers at that. Hysteria had created a considerable number of 6th tiers, but there were definitely not many that had reached the peak stage of the 6th tier, and those that still possessed intelligence were even rarer. Ling Han knew that Hysteria was truly wary of him. Previously, there had been 3 6th tier monsters, and now there were 4 more. It was clear that Hysteria was determined to kill him. He immediately put away the Empress and Hunyo. Faced with 6th tier battle prowess, the 2 women would not be of help at all. With a shout, 7 6th tier monsters charged over, all of them showing off their terrifying aura and wanting to crush Ling Han into dust. With just you guys, that is still a little bit lacking. Ling Han exchanged blows with these monsters. He knew that he was outmatched, but this was a rare opportunity for him to train. Even if he could not gain inspiration, he could still temper his own battle prowess, and that was not too bad either. However, the battle had not gone on for too long when Ling Han felt a tremendous pressure. Not only were Hysteria's monsters at the peak stage of the 6th tier, but they were also proficient in techniques and even had 2nd grade combination seals. If it was 1st grade seals, Hysteria should have bestowed them all on Meng Dong, Huangfu Dongyue, and the others. Even if it was the strongest in the world, it could not possibly develop new 1st grade seals as easily as that. It would definitely need a very long time. Thus, in order to make its creation strong enough to kill Ling Han, it could only equip these monsters with 2nd grade combination seals. This actually was also a kind of risk. Without its spiritual mark, the 6th tier heavenly venerates that had developed intelligence would definitely come to slow realization and form their own free will. They would walk their own paths and break free from Hysteria's control. What heavenly venerate would be willing to submit to another? What more when it was a peak stage, 6th tier, heavenly venerate? However, in the short term, these 6th tiers couldn't possibly break free from Hysteria's control. In order to kill Ling Han, it would spare no expense. Ling Han parried, but his enemies were too strong, and they had the absolute upper hand in terms of numbers. Naturally, he could only parry. Furthermore, danger was everywhere, and he was constantly wandering on the border of life and death. It could not be helped. His battle prowess was very strong, but his body had only been tempered by the 3 fundamental powers, after all. The toughness of his body was far from being comparable to what sixth tiers boasted. Even so, Ling Han was still fighting with his full strength. Unless it was a time when he really couldn't hold on any longer, he would definitely not retreat. After battling for over a dozen days, Ling Han finally withdrew. The 7 monsters hurriedly set off in pursuit, but Ling Han used the terrain here to continuously throw them off his tracks. He had already been here for 2 million years. Even if he did not know every single place like the back of his hand, there was absolutely no problem with tricking these newcomers who had just arrived. There were 7 great monsters pursuing him, and 3 of them had actually been severely wounded by the energy storm. If it were not for the fact that there were still 4 of them, Ling Han would really have wanted to turn around and fight. After escaping, Ling Han went into seclusion again. Using 30,000 years, Ling Han digested the comprehension he had obtained through this battle. At the same time, he also used the resonance of the heavenly venerable seals to create another 7th grade seal. If he could go on like this, perhaps he would only need 100 million years to create all the 7th grade seals. He came out of seclusion and continued to search for raw stones. However, he didn't expect to encounter Xianqihu again. This vengeful spirit simply would not disperse. Ling Han really suspected that he had some kind of enmity with him in his last life. Why was Xianqihu always targeting him? There was nothing much to say. The only thing left to do was fight. Ling Han presently possessed the raw power of the late stage of the 6th tier, which was only slightly inferior to Xianqihu's. This completely qualified Ling Han to fight Xianqihu equally. The 2 of them fought fiercely. Though Xianqihu was still at a slight advantage, the gap was really not too big. If Ling Han could advance to the peak stage of the 4th tier, then he would not be inferior to Xianqihu at all. In fact, it would not be strange even if he had a slight upper hand. They both unleashed their full power, and their battle was incredibly intense. Ling Han had formed several hundred dimensions, which he released together to suppress his opponent. Even 6th tier elites would be affected by them. Xianqihu, on the other hand, possessed 1st grade combination seals. This was similarly extremely domineering, and as his attacks landed, nothing could escape destruction. They battled for quite a few months, and finally a 6th tier from the Flaming Frost realm appeared, joining the battle to attack Ling Han together. Xianqihu, let's fight again next time. Ling Han retreated. However, next time I'll make you cry. Sharp tongue, Xianqihu said coldly. He gave up after a short chase. The terrain here was complicated, and without a large advantage in speed, neither of them would be able to catch up to the other. Heavenly venerates at the same cultivation level were hard to kill. These weren't just empty words. After shaking off Xianqihu, Ling Han naturally began his seclusion again. Though Xianqihu was very annoying, as an opponent that could help Ling Han temper himself, he was quite a good candidate. In a one-on-one situation, only Xianqihu, Wu Haoyang, Lin Yulian, and a few others could put so much pressure on Ling Han at present. What a coincidence! When Ling Han came out of seclusion, he very quickly met Xianqihu again. There was nothing much to say, and the 2 of them battled again. Compared to the previous battle, Ling Han had made great improvement, but as a supreme prodigy, how could Xianqihu not have improved as well? It was still Xianqihu who had the upper hand, but his advantage was also getting smaller and smaller. You really have grown your wings, Xianqihu said harshly. Unfortunately, there is no cure for regret in this world, Ling Han stated calmly, his fists waving even more quickly. Humph, when I advance to the 6th tier, killing you will be a piece of cake, Xianqihu declared. Of course, and if I advance into 6th tier, killing you will be like a father spanking one's son, Ling Han countered. The 2 of them not only fought fiercely with their hands, but also fought fiercely with their mouths. Ling Han had long since developed a sharp tongue with the large black dog. He had not thought that Chihu was actually not a pushover, either. His verbal skills were completely not inferior to Ling Han's at all. This battle continued for close to a month's time, and only then did the two of them call a ceasefire reluctantly. It was not that someone had barged in and interrupted their battle, but rather that they had used all the moves that they could use. If they continued fighting, it would just be nothing but repetition. They could not do anything to their opponent at all. Chapter 2953. 2953 Crimson Great Herb? Chapter 2953. 2953 Crimson Great Herb. 2953 Crimson Great Herb. Thus, instead of wasting time, it would be better to stop the battle and digest the experience gained in it. Under the massive pressure of a powerful enemy like Chihu, Ling Han actually created another 7th grade seal, making him feel like he had to thank Chihu. The best way to thank you is to beat you till you burst. Ling Han thought to himself. He came out of seclusion and continued to search for veins of raw stone. He crossed numerous mountains and ocean trenches with unknown depths that had dried up, exploring mines everywhere. However, as more and more people entered into this dimension, the competition became more and more intense, and his gains also became lesser and lesser. Several years later, Ling Han finally found a vein of ore. "I've finally found one." Ling Han rubbed his hands together, slightly excited. He had not made any discoveries for tens of thousands of years. He measured this vein of ore vein, yet he frowned because he had discovered an unknown object in the depths of the ore vein. It was so-called unknown not because he did not recognize what this thing was, but rather because he could not see it at all. It was a very large object that was wrapped in some powerful energy that blocked his divine sense. He was very surprised. What was this thing that even his divine sense could not penetrate? He dug it out for a look. Ling Han dug with all his might. Heavenly venerable stone was not a hard material, and he soon dug to the depths of the vein of ore. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure assaulted him, making it difficult for him to take another step forward. He couldn't help but feel astonished. He had the battle prowess of the 6th tier, yet he was actually no match for this aura. Could it be that there was something on the level of 7th tier inside? Was it a crimson great herb? Ling Han couldn't help but feel longing. The crimson-colored great herb had always been the stuff of legends, but there was a pattern among great herbs that allowed a great elite to deduce the existence of this great herb. The orange-colored great herb could help 4th tier elites advance one step further, reaching the 5th tier, and the crimson-colored great herb could help 5th tier elites advance to the 6th tier. Of course, this would only increase their chances of successfully breaking through by a tiny bit. What Ling Han needed the most now was time. He believed that he could advance to the 5th tier or 6th tier without relying on external power. But if he had the help of a great herb, it would undoubtedly shrink this time by countless folds. Come on, come on. He dug a few more feet, yet discovered that the pressure was getting greater and greater, causing him to feel as if he had become an ordinary person that was trapped in a swamp filled with mud, experiencing great strain. He continued onwards with all his might, and finally a crimson color appeared ahead of him. Ling Han was surprised. This great herb was a little too big, wasn't it? The great herbs that had been previously unearthed were only about a foot long, and it wouldn't be much bigger than that, but this smear of crimson red was at least 3 feet long, as expected of the top of all herbs. Ling Han dug again, and after a few more hand chops, he couldn't help but reveal an expression of shock. This was the great herb. What appeared in front of his eyes was actually a crimson dress. It was naturally impossible for a dress alone to put so much pressure on him. But no matter how strong a heavenly venerate tool was, there was a limit, and that was the 6th tier. 7th tier. Only a 7th tier heavenly venerate could possess 7th tier power. There was nothing that could equal that in existence, which also meant that there was a 7th-tier elite buried here. It couldn't be, right? Hadn't all the 7th tiers of the Genesis world of the last era appeared? Chongya and the others, as well as the dead, heavenly venerate yellow sand, totaled up to 6. Should he continue digging? Ling Han hesitated slightly. There didn't seem to be much meaning in digging out the corpse of another 7th tier. His hesitation was only momentary, and he immediately began digging again. He was a curious person. No matter what, he had to get to the bottom of this, right? He carefully continued. The aura of the 7th tier continuously seeped out, causing his face to pale. Though he possessed 6th tier battle prowess, 7th tiers could crush any existence, and added with the fact that Ling Han only possessed 6th tier battle prowess, but was not a real 6th tier. His physique was much too inferior. At this moment, Ling Han genuinely felt like giving up. But right at this moment, that powerful pressure instantly spiked countless times over. As the crimson shadows moved, a person suddenly sat up. Say se. Countless broken bits of rubble fell down. But Ling Han could not feel anything. He was just staring at the person in front of him. This was a woman, breathtakingly beautiful and indescribably exquisite. The beauty of the Empress and Hunyo should not be inferior to hers, but this woman possessed an indescribable bearing, making her seem more ethereal and serene. This woman's eyes had initially been closed, but now they were suddenly open. Instantly, she looked lively, which also gave rise to an astonishing pressure centered on her. Even Ling Han was breaking out in a cold sweat. 7th tier. This was definitely a supreme being of 7th tier. Why was there another 7th tier? If there had still been a living 7th tier, heavenly venerate Chongyan and the others would definitely have said so, and would have gone to search for her. Moreover, the person who had restrained extermination in the past was only heavenly venerate yellow sand, and there was no other person. Thus it was strange. How had this 7th tier come out? Ling Han's first reaction was to flee, but he immediately discovered that though this woman's eyes were astonishingly beautiful, as deep as the sea, they were also filled with blankness and innocence. This kind of gaze could only be seen on infants. A dignified 7th tier heavenly venerate was actually a newborn infant. How was this possible? Heavenly venerates were despised by the heaven and earth. There was absolutely no way that the heaven and earth would nurture a 7th tier. Could it be that there was something like an upgraded version of the Dimension Scroll, which directly created a 7th tier? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Hysteria was a dimension, a transcendent dimension at that. Even it couldn't create a 7th tier. So how could other dimensions do it? Hello. Ling Han broke into a smile, trying his best to appear gentle and amiable. The red-clothed woman slanted her head slightly and stared at Ling Han. Hello. Her words were unclear, and it was as if she were just learning how to speak. Could it be that when the Genesis world had collapsed all those years ago, her spirit had suffered a powerful impact, and that was why she had become like this? This was not impossible. A 7th tier being indestructible was referring to their physical bodies, which were tempered by the 6 fundamental particles. But divine sense couldn't reach this level. For example, the impact caused by the destruction of the Genesis world could shatter it. Heavenly venerate yellow sand was clear proof of this. His physical body was unscathed, but his spirit was dead. Hence, if this female supreme being's divine sense had been severely damaged at that time, it would not have been strange for her to have turned into an infant. However, after a heavenly venerate developed intelligence, they would be able to grow at an incomparably shocking rate. What more when it was a 7th tier? What's your name? Ling Han questioned further. What is your name? This female supreme being echoed his words. Though she was stuttering, it was clear that her words were much clearer than before. Fine, I've asked for nothing. Ling Han sighed. Was he going to have to teach a child how to speak? He didn't dare to let the Empress and Hunyo out. This female supreme being didn't know how to suppress her aura at all, and even Ling Han felt immense pressure, as if his skin was about to tear. The Empress and Hunyo were far inferior to himself, and faced with this aura, they would definitely be crushed. I'll teach her then. Ling Han taught this female supreme being how to speak. It had to be said that he was still secretly a little proud. She was a 7th tier, and he could already become a teacher for a 7th tier. Chapter 2954, 2954 Guidance. Chapter 2954, 2954 Guidance. 2954 Guidance. The learning ability of a 7th tier was naturally strong. In just a few days, that female supreme being had already learned how to speak, but her intelligence could not be praised. She was still stuck at the level of a 3-year-old child. Ling Han taught her how to restrain her aura. If this continued, the skin all over his body would be cracking. The red-clothed woman learned for a few more days, and finally learned how to control her aura. If she did not take the initiative to reveal herself, even a 6th tier would not be able to discover how strong she was. Ling Han let the Empress and Hunyo out of the celestial guest residence. When the two women saw an exquisitely beautiful woman suddenly appear, they couldn't help but feel surprised. The beauty of this woman was definitely not inferior to theirs. "Who is she?" Hunyo asked curiously. "Who is she?" the red-clothed woman also asked, her head slanted. She was like how Xiao Gu had once been. Her favorite hobby was mimicking the words of others. "I unearthed her from a raw stone." Ling Han spread out his hands helplessly. The two women were curious and stared at this woman. The woman in red also stared at them, her head slanted and her eyes similarly filled with curiosity. Why were these two people different from Ling Han? "Don't underestimate her. She is a 7th tier," Ling Han said. "What?" The Empress and Hunyo were both given a fright. There is nothing more terrifying than elites of the 7th tier in this world. "Husband, what kind of luck do you have that you can even unearth a 7th tier elite?" the Empress mused ruefully. Previously, Ling Han had already unearthed a 7th tier, but that had been a corpse, unlike this one, who was a living being. If this spread out, it would definitely scare a large number of people to death. Meanwhile, the woman in red giggled. She was just a child and loved to cause trouble and be mischievous. "What is your name?" Hunyo asked curiously. The red-clothed woman slanted her head to one side. "I do not have a name." Hunyo couldn't help but feel excited. "Then Nyo will give you one." The red-clothed woman clapped her hands and said, "Okay." She seemed to find Hunyo's words interesting, and Parrot, "Nyo wants a name." "That's wrong. Only Nyo can use the name of Nyo," Hunyo insisted. Hunyo was very excited. This was naming a 7th tier. So she felt a great sense of accomplishment. "Your name will be Bao Mei then." She finally came up with a name after thinking for a long while. Ling Han couldn't help but grit his teeth. In the past, he had given Hunyo this name. Did this little girl still want to bring his naming skill to greater heights? "She's all dressed in red, so why don't we just use this as inspiration for a name?" the Empress suggested. It was rare for her to be interested in the matters of others. After all, this was about a 7th tier. "Bao Mei sounds nice." Hunyo insisted. "Chi-yi is more suitable." The Empress did not back down. The two women were at loggerheads again, both wanting to obtain the right to name a 7th tier. Juhua, the red-clothed woman suddenly spoke up. She pointed at herself. "Nyo likes this name." "Fine." Neither woman realized her wish. Meanwhile, Hunyo jumped up. "Don't snatch Nyo's exclusive property of Nyo." The red-clothed woman, heavenly venerate, absolute fire, giggled. "Nyo is Juhua." No matter how Hunyo flew into a thunderous rage, protesting repeatedly. Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire was completely unconcerned and firmly believed in this self-proclaimed name. Ling Han tried to ask her about what had happened before she had fallen into a deep slumber, but Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire couldn't remember anything. She had only just begun learning how to speak. So how could she still have any of her previous memories? Come, let's go check out other areas. Ling Han gave up. Zhu Hua is a 7th tier. Can she bring us to a deeper dimension? The Empress asked. Ling Han nodded. Haha, you know me best. Nonsense. Niu knows you too. Hu Niu hurriedly said. The 4 people directly proceeded downwards, planning to just forcefully barge into the next dimension like this. In a short while, the flames formed by the fundamental particles were seen burning fiercely. The closer they were to the core of the group of dimensions, the more terrifying the pressure became. It was enough to incinerate even 6th tier Heavenly Venerates and turn them into ashes. Ling Han pushed out Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire, but this female supreme being did not have much courage at all. With a sharp scream, she immediately fled back. However, she was too strong. Amidst a sharp cry, the eardrums of Ling Han and the others all burst, causing blood to flow out. It was as if those fundamental flames had also suffered a blow as they dimmed and were extinguished one after another. Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire couldn't help but be startled. She had not thought that the might of her cry would actually be so great. Out of curiosity, she released another sharp cry. The sound rumbled out and extinguished the flames that were even farther away from them. Ling Han hurriedly drew Hunyo and the Empress into the celestial guest residence, and then used his own power to protect them. Otherwise, even if they were protected by a Heavenly Venerate tool, so what? The people inside would definitely be shattered into blood by the impact. Meanwhile, he covered his ears with his hands. However, he was still unable to prevent his skin from being ripped apart. Blood started to flow from his 7 apertures. Stop! 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 He called out. Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire was so excited that she completely ignored his existence. When she finally discovered that there was something off with him, Ling Han had already become a bloody figure. All the skin on his body had long since been torn apart beyond recognition. "What's wrong with you?" she asked as she cocked her head to one side, her expression that of complete innocence. Ling Han was rendered speechless. He had been wounded to such a state, yet he still couldn't exact revenge, which made him feel gloomy. But to say nothing of the fact that he was no match for her now, even if he was, how could he bring himself to bully a child? Forget about it. He was definitely going to suffer this loss in silence. Come. Let's step out first, and I will teach you a few moves. Ling Han sighed. If he wanted Zhu Hua to pave the way for him, he would first have to teach her how to control and use her power. Otherwise, he would be dead before he could even enter into the next dimension. Zhu Hua still wanted to play, but when she saw Ling Han walking back, she could only follow gloomily. Next, Ling Han taught Zhu Hua how to use her own power. A 7th tier was a 7th tier, and Zhu Hua learned very quickly. She probably would be able to perfectly control her own power in a few months' time. However, after only a few days, Ling Han was discovered. This time, it was people from the Flaming Frost Realm. There were a total of 7 people, and they were naturally all 6 tiers. Yu Borong. Ling Han immediately recognized one of them. This old geezer was indeed intent on killing him, working so hard to find him. Ling Han, I've found you, Yu Borong said in a baleful voice. Ling Han gave an, "Oh." Then, congratulations. Congratulations. Yu Borong humphed. Do you think this is a game? Now that I've found you, it means that your time of death has come, he said balefully. Ling Han was naturally unconcerned. There were merely 7 6th tiers, so what if they ganged up on him? Could it be that they could insta-kill him? As long as they could not insta-kill him, he could tear a rip into the void and return to the Genesis world. No one could pursue him. Moreover, I still have a 7th tier by my side, so why don't you guys give it a try? Then just bring it on, and see how I will deal with you, Ling Han said with a smile. Attack! There is no need to be polite, Yu Borong declared coldly. The 7 sixth tiers surrounded Ling Han, all of them exuding an eerie pressure. Chapter 2955 2955 Tremor. Chapter 2955 2955 Tremor. 2955 Tremor. How many 6th tiers were there in the world? About 100 at the beginning. There might have been more, but internal strife had broken out previously, and there were also some 6th tiers that had died. So there were only about 100 of them now, and there wouldn't be many more than that. Although 6th tiers couldn't be called supreme elites, they were still one of the few elites in the world. Each of them had the ability to sweep aside the ages. Yu Borong and the others surrounded Ling Han, all of them filled with killing intent. Ling Han was a person that had to be killed. Yu Borong, for example, was likely here to avenge the death of his son, while the other 6 thought that Ling Han was too freakish. Once he gained the battle prowess of 7th tier, that would cause immeasurable damage to the Genesis world. What do you want? Heavenly Venerate, Absolute Fire, asked a little timidly. These people were filled with blazing killing intent, which scared her. If she is together with this brat, she must be no one good, either. We kill her as well, a 6th tier declared. Yu Borong was the first to move. Boom! His palm moved, striking out at Ling Han and Zhu Hua together. Ah! When Heavenly Venerate, Absolute Fire saw this palm strike flying towards her, her first reaction was not to dodge or parry, but to grab her head and scream in fright. The sound turned into waves that surged out in all directions. Ling Han had long since prepared himself. Not only had he covered his ears, he had also channeled over 100 dimensions to defend himself. Ka. Multiple cracks appeared on the dimensions, but thankfully they did not shatter. Even so, Ling Han's nose was still bleeding. He couldn't completely avoid this vicious attack. He was already in such a state. What more Yu Borong and the others? They were all directly sent flying. All the clothes on their bodies were torn and tattered, their skin cracked, and blood was gushing out. So what if they were 6th tiers, faced with the might of a 7th tier? A single cry was enough to have such an impact that their hair was disheveled, and they were bleeding from all their apertures. Ling Han took advantage of the opening to charge out. He headed directly for Yu Borong. This old bastard had targeted him time and time again. He was too despicable. Pung. From the very beginning, Ling Han was going all out. His 8th grade seals were all unleashed, boosting his power by 1,000 times. With his basic power, which was now at the late stage of the 6th tier, he had already reached the extent of being able to crush Yu Borong. Yu Borong was presently in a state of turbulence. Who would have thought that a woman who looked so fragile could actually burst out with such terrifying battle prowess? He was a 6th tier, yet a 6th tier was actually unable to block the might of a mere cry. What did this signify? This woman was a 7th tier ultimate elite. However, how was this possible? The Genesis world of the 2 eras added together only had 10 7th tiers, and even if there would be more in the future, they should emerge from among the 6th tiers like Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and Golden Silk Moth. But definitely not be this woman. Even if his temperament was extremely calm, he was still feeling apprehensive at this moment. It was also because of this that he could only retreat continuously when faced with Ling Han's barrage of attacks. The other 6th tier, Heavenly Venerates, were also numb with shock. They stared blankly at Heavenly Venerate, Absolute Fire, and their hearts were in a mess for a moment. But they couldn't go on like this forever, right? Greetings, milady. They all paid their greetings to Heavenly Venerate, Absolute Fire. Heavenly Venerate, Absolute Fire looked at these people blankly. You guys were so fierce just now, and now you're acting so humble. What do you want to do? She asked weakly, Why do you guys want to hit Nyo? Pooh! The 6th-tier elites couldn't help but gape in shock. One of them even spluttered in his shock. Even the self-restraint of 6th tier wasn't enough. Nyo. What heavenly venerate would call themselves that? Especially when this heavenly venerate was an immortal and indestructible 7th-tier ultimate elite. Her image instantly crumbled. Dare I ask, how do we address you, milady? A 6th-tier asked, clasping his hands respectfully. Heavenly venerate Absolute Fire was instantly keen and puffed out her chest. Nyo is Juhua. Juhua. The 6 heavenly venerates exchanged looks, all appearing very puzzled. Putting aside 7th tiers, they had never heard of such a heavenly venerate before. A heavenly venerate could not possibly appear out of thin air. Of course, there was an exception in those that came from the Genesis world of the last era. Hold on. Could it be that this person was an ultimate elite of the Genesis world from the last era? Right. This was the most likely deduction. Greetings, Lady Juhua. The 6 elites bowed again. Juhua looked very pleased with herself, tilting her chin as she looked left and right. She was very satisfied with this. The 6 elites were even more puzzled. Was this really a 7th tier ultimate elite? However, they had all personally experienced the power of this woman. If she wasn't a 7th tier, then what could be considered a 7th tier? They could only watch from the sidelines. Ling Han clearly had a close relationship with this 7th tier. If she didn't speak, how would they dare move to deal with Ling Han? Were they tired of living? Ling Han unleashed his full power. In the first place, Yu Borong was no match for him. Added with the fact that he had been wounded by the roar of Juhua earlier even, though his injuries weren't very serious, it would affect his battle prowess some. Under Ling Han's wave-like attacks, this effect was also continuously magnified, causing his disadvantage to become more and more obvious. Yu Borong couldn't help but feel shocked. How much time had passed? He was already no match for Ling Han. At this rate, to say nothing of exacting revenge for the murder of his son, even he would have to die helplessly under Ling Han's fists. He hurriedly said, "Friends, are you really going to allow this despicable brat to commit crime?" The 6 elites looked at each other and finally turned to look at Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire. However, she had absolutely no intention of speaking, so who would dare make a move? Was a 7th tier ultimate elite mere decoration? Ling Han's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. He had to kill Yu Borong in this 2-hour-long power burst. Otherwise, even if he used the 9th grade combination seals, the increase in battle prowess would drop to more than 200 times. In that case, it would be difficult to kill Yu Borong. After all, he was a 6th tier. Throughout history, there were not many that could reach this kind of height, which one of them was not a prodigy among prodigies, an overlord among overlords. Yu Borong also knew this very well. He defended with all his might, not hoping to succeed, but merely hoping to survive these 2 hours. He drew out a heavenly venerate tool. It was a silver spear, and as the spear danced, it turned into multiple white dragons, possessing great might. Since Yu Borong had advanced to the 6th tier, he had not used a heavenly venerate tool, because the boost to his battle prowess could be considered negligible, but now he had actually unleashed it, which was proof enough of just how terrible his situation was. Even if there was only the slightest bit of improvement, it was like a straw to clutch at. Just how hopeless was this situation for him? Ling Han roared endlessly. "Old bastard, I definitely won't let you escape this time." Wang. He summoned all of his dimensions. In an instant, over 300 dimensions that were close to high level appeared, illuminating the heavens and forming an indescribable pressure. Pooh! Yu Borong's movements froze, and he was instantly hit by Ling Han's punch, causing him to throw up blood madly. He also spluttered out his internal organs, all of them shattered. "Milady, please have mercy." Seeing that Yu Borong was really about to die, the 6 elites finally couldn't help but speak up, pleading with heavenly venerate absolute fire. Chapter 2956. 2956 killed. Chapter 2956. 2,956 killed. 2,956 killed. Ju, whose head slanted to one side, looking blankly at the 6 great elites. Are you guys talking to me? But it was clearly Ling Han who was fighting, so what did it have to do with her? Seeing the expression of heavenly venerate absolute fire, the 6 elites were also baffled. If you were willing to let Yu Borong off the hook, then just a nod would be enough. And if you did not agree, then whether it was a cold humph or ignoring them completely, that would be fine. But what did she mean by looking at them with her head tilted to one side like this? Was she playing around with them? If it were another person, they would definitely fly into a thunderous rage and directly move to smack the other party to death. But now they were facing a 7th-tier ultimate elite, so even if they knew that she was joking around with them, what could they do? After reaching the 7th tier, one could do as they liked. The heavens couldn't suppress them, and the earth couldn't imprison them. There was absolutely no need to care about how others felt. Ling Han attacked madly. Wang. He released all the dimensions. Now, there was only one opponent, and he had suppressed him. He was not worried that Yu Borong would still have the spare energy to damage his dimensions. If he did, he would really be thinking that he was not dying fast enough. This gave Yu Borong an indescribable pressure, causing his situation to become worse and worse. He had no choice but to seek help from his companions again. Meanwhile, the 6 elites were dumbfounded. They had really been stunned by Ling Han. Several hundred dimensions. What kind of concept was that? It should be known that there were only 3 among them that had nurtured a dimension in their bodies when they had been pseudo-heavenly venerates, causing their battle prowess to surpass that of their peers. But it was only a single dimension. Previously, there were only 5 7th tiers in the Flaming Frost realm. Aside from their descendants, disciples, and grand disciples, how could others possibly be favored by a 7th tier, who could help them create another space in their dantian to accommodate a 2nd dimension? But even if there were such lucky people, such as Lin Yolian, Xian Chihu, and so on, how could they compare to Ling Han? They were completely inferior. Was this Hysteria's power then? The 6 of them all thought, could it be that Hysteria is so terrifying? A 7th tier could only create a space to accommodate an additional dimension, but Hysteria could stuff in an additional few hundred? Milady, Yu Borong is a member of the main force against Hysteria. We only have about 106 tiers in total, so how could he be killed here? A 6th tier mustered up the courage to say this to heavenly venerate absolute fire. Ju Hu cocked her head and said in displeasure, "Why are you guys asking Nio? Nio doesn't even know what you guys are talking about. You guys are so annoying, Nio hates you guys." The 6 elites were greatly shocked. A 7th tier said she hated them. Did this mean that she was going to attack them? They hurriedly retreated. Once a 7th tier moved, no one would be able to stop him. Having condensed the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world, they were powerful to an indescribable extent, and there was absolutely no way to stand against them. However, he had no time to reprimand them at all. Ling Han's attacks were too violent, and it was clear that he wanted to destroy Yu Borong in under 2 hours. His attacks were earth-shattering, and when he threw a punch, mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The entire dimension was trembling, triggering a terrifying energy storm. This undoubtedly made the battle even more dangerous. Not only did Yu Borong have to resist the direct pressure from Ling Han, he also had to guard against the energy storm that could charge out at any time. This naturally made his situation worse, and he was in imminent danger. This energy storm was naturally impartial, and similarly exerted a great pressure on Ling Han. However, Ling Han had already made up his mind, and that was to trade injury for injury. He had the upper hand, and sustaining the energy storm would only cause him serious injury. At most, but Yu Borong would be dying. The 6 elites saw this, yet not only were they unable to rescue him, they didn't even dare to open their mouths to plead for leniency. This was because Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire had already rebuked them and said she hated them. Who would dare to provoke her further? Pum! Yu Borong's left arm was shattered with a punch from Ling Han. Blood exploded and spattered in all directions. 6 tears were extremely powerful. Wherever this blood flowed, it would be as if the spot had suffered a heavy blow and would explode into pieces. Ling Han also spat out a mouthful of blood. In order to severely wound Yu Borong with this blow, he had also been struck by the energy storm. This was a price that had to be paid. It was as if he felt nothing, and his offensive was still as strong as ever. Yu Borong took a deep breath, wanting to forcibly extract the power of heaven and earth to quickly grow his arm back. But this was the void, where the 6 fundamental powers were extremely violent. He inhaled a single breath madly, and his face instantly flushed red. He appeared to be in extreme pain. Originally, he could suppress this kind of violent force, but now he was heavily injured. Not only was this unable to help him, it instead caused his injuries to worsen. "Old bastard, I'll send you on your way to the afterlife," Ling Han said coldly. He brandished his fists furiously, and his offensive became even more rapid. Yu Borong gritted his teeth and forged on, being able to cultivate to 6th tier. How could his will be defeated so easily? Fight, fight, fight. The 2 elites were both going all out. If Ling Han relaxed the slightest at this moment, Yu Borong would be able to catch his breath and escape with his life. And if Yu Borong relaxed the slightest, his only fate would be death. Ling Han forced Yu Borong to continuously retreat. The powers of dimension suppressed him, and he delivered another heavy punch, instantly sending Yu Borong flying. Boom! The energy storm rushed out and just happened to crash into Yu Borong's body, causing him serious injury. Yu Borong let out a muffled groan, and one side of his body exploded. This was caused by the joint efforts of the energy storm and Ling Han. Even if he was a 6th tier, he still seemed extremely fragile in this dangerous place. Ling Han let out a battle cry, his figure in hot pursuit. He would not give the other party another chance. He was going to use a series of attacks to completely dispose of Yu Borong. The 6 great elites were all restless. Yu Borong was really going to die. Could they just watch helplessly? But to make a move, a 7th tier ultimate elite was just standing right in front of them. So how could they dare? With such a moment of hesitation, Yu Borong finally reached the point of complete exhaustion. No matter how firm his willpower was, and no matter how tenacious it was not enough to support him any longer. He was heavily injured, and one side of his body had exploded into nothing, which seriously affected his battle prowess. Furthermore, Ling Han had adopted a life-or-death style of battle. This was not trading injury for injury, but trading injury for his life. "Brat, you will eventually get your just desserts." Yu Borong released a furious roar of despair. He was sure that Heavenly Venerate Chongyan and the other 7 tiers would definitely not spare Ling Han, especially now that even a 6th tier was killed by Ling Han like this. Then the 7th tiers would also have to abandon everything else in order to kill Ling Han at all costs. Otherwise, there would never be another chance in the future. "You speak too much nonsense," Ling Han said coldly. He was merciless and threw over 30 punches in a row, instantly killing Yu Borong. A 6th tier died. The 6 great elites were all cold and speechless. They felt a sympathy that came from seeing a peer killed in this way, causing them to feel a sense of sadness. Ling Han was too ruthless. 6 tiers were the main force of the resistance against Hysteria's troops, and the death of one of them was an extremely great pity. To the Flaming Frost Realm, this was a great loss. Wong, a 6th tier had died, and his majestic life essence boiled, turning into an ocean that surged towards Ling Han. Hold on, why was there so little? Chapter 2957. 2957, Shocking Change. Chapter 2957. 2957, Shocking Change. 2957, Shocking Change. Ling Han extended his senses, and an expression of disbelief immediately appeared on his face. That was because the majority of his life essence had flowed towards heavenly venerate absolute fire, as if she was a bottomless abyss that could absorb and accommodate everything. How could Ling Han not be stunned? According to the deduction of the 7th tier ultimate elites, absorbing and refining life essence was Hysteria's unique ability. This was because Hysteria had relied on this to start its conquest. It could even swallow dimensions and use them to strengthen itself. Ling Han, Huangfu Dongyue, Meng Dong, and so on had all been bestowed with this ability by Hysteria. However, they could only absorb life essence, so there was a great limitation of their ability. This was very normal. How could Hysteria possibly bestow any real trump card on them? Wouldn't it be afraid of any accidents? However, there was now another that was able to absorb life essence. Was Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire one of Hysteria's creations? Was this possible? The Heavenly Venerate Absolute Fire was a 7th tier. Could Hysteria create a 7th tier ultimate elite? Utterly impossible. Hold on. What if this woman was like Meng Dong and the others, and was one of the living beings of the Genesis world who had had Hysteria's spiritual mark attached to them? Then wouldn't it be possible? Of course, throughout history, there were only a total of 12 7th tiers. If Hysteria just happened to choose one person, and that person became a 7th tier in the future, then the chances of this were pitifully low. It was like it had struck a great stroke of luck. Becoming a 7th tier was very, very difficult. However, why was Juhua able to absorb life essence? It was normal for her to be more powerful than Ling Han. She was a 7th tier, and her strength was superior to his, so she was naturally able to absorb more than he could. Juhua also let out an exclamation of surprise. She was obviously unaware of this ability of hers. When the waves of life essence surged into her body, she felt a strangeness and novelty, as well as an indescribable fear. In essence, she was still a child that had yet to reach 1 year old in age. The 6 elites were enraged and shouted at Ling Han, "Ling Han!" For a 6th tier elite to die, just like that, it was a great loss to the Flaming Frost realm. Ling Han came back to his senses, took out a great herb, and began to gnaw on it. This was the healing type of great herb, so it was naturally impossible for him to have eaten it before this. Now that he was gnawing on it like it was a carrot, the injuries on his body immediately began to recover. "You have caused a great calamity. No one can save you now." Ling Han's expression was filled with disdain. "I've already killed him, so what's the point of spouting such nonsense? Come, whoever is displeased and unconvinced, just bring it on. Just try and see whom I would fear." The 6 elites all glared at him, but did not speak. They were naturally unafraid of Ling Han, but the problem was that there was still an ultimate 7th tier elite on the sidelines. If she wanted to protect Ling Han, who would dare make a move? When a 7th tier killed, there was no need for a reason. A single thought was more powerful than heaven and earth. However, no one noticed that the eyes of Juhua, which were originally the pure eyes of an infant, had changed. A layer of dark red had appeared, and she had become incredibly demonic. This dark red color became darker and darker, which also caused her aura to go out of control and blaze like fire. "Ah!" She released a sharp cry and shot straight up into the skies, casually brandishing her fists and striking out with her legs. Hong, hong, hong. The power of the 7th tier completely leaked out, forming a frightening, destructive power. Ling Han and the 6 elites all paled in shock. Ju, who had clearly lost control of her emotions. In fact, she had even entered a state of madness. A dignified 7th tier could actually go mad. Ling Han also knew that Zhu Hua had just absorbed a large amount of life essence from Yu Borong. Could it be that this was the cause? Otherwise, there was no other possibility. The 6 great elites were all enraptured. For a 7th tier to go berserk was too terrifying. But when they looked at Ling Han again, their killing intent involuntarily blazed. Now that Zhu Hua had gone crazy, it was naturally impossible for her to protect Ling Han. Furthermore, Ling Han's injuries had not recovered yet, and the explosive power of the heavenly venerable seals had just passed, so it was precisely the moment when he was at his weakest. If they worked together to attack him, they could very possibly kill Ling Han quickly. It was now or never. Ling Han was too terrifying. His strength was improving every day, and if he was allowed to take another step further, he might be able to possess the battle prowess of a 7th tier. By then, would anyone be able to deal with him? Die! The 6 elites communicated with each other through their divine sense and moved together, attacking Ling Han. Haha, come fight me! Ling Han naturally wouldn't be surprised by this. He had long since expected that these 6 people would gang up on him. The only miscalculation was that Zhu Hua would actually be unreliable and go mad. As Ling Han fought, he continued to retreat. At present, Zhu Hua was attacking willfully, and even if the distance was somewhat large, the might of 7th tier was still incredibly terrifying. If he was even touched once, he would definitely be injured. Today it will be difficult for you to escape. Dread of Hysteria's troops die. The 6 great elites all unleashed their full power at the first instant. Each of them possessed a 2nd grade seal, and with the boost, their power increased by more than 70 times. When secret techniques were used, their might was incredibly frightening. Ling Han also channeled the 9th grade combination seals. With the amplification of more than 200 times, his battle prowess was definitely not inferior to any 6 tiers, but there were as many as 6 of them, which naturally gave him tremendous pressure. This was a very good opportunity to temper himself. Ling Han thought. He had the initiative. Once he tore a rip into the void, he would be able to return to the Genesis world, and the others could only become lost in the void because they did not have dimension coordinates. This was something that he was even more awesome at than Hysteria. Fight, fight, fight. The 7 elites were all fighting with their full strength, and the battle was extremely intense. This was a fierce battle among elites that were only inferior to the 7th tier, so it was naturally incomparably terrifying. Every attack carried force that could destroy the heavens. Thankfully, this was in the void, or the damage caused would be unimaginable. Ah! In the distant skies, Zhu was suddenly released a sharp cry. The pressure of the 7th tier swept out. Ling Han and the 6 great elites felt an involuntary, suffocating feeling. This was too terrifying, so even they couldn't help but stop involuntarily. And this was still because it was them. If they had only had 5th tier battle prowess, they would definitely have been throwing up blood violently by now. Xiao! A figure flew down, her speed so great that no one could catch sight of her. Ling Han and the others were all shocked. They were elites at the peak stage of the 6th tier, yet were actually unable to glimpse this figure. This naturally was unbelievable to them. 7th tier, only a 7th tier could accomplish this. Zhu Hua appeared. Her red dress was like blood, and her whole body was enshrouded in light that was radiating as if it had a life of its own. Her appearance remained unchanged, and she was still as breathtakingly beautiful as ever. However, her aura had completely changed. Previously, she had been innocent and ethereal, but now she was filled with aloofness and a bone-deep, killing intent. Even 6th tier elites would feel a chill rise from the bottom of their hearts. There was not the slightest bit of confusion left in her eyes. There was only the indifference of a supreme elite. In her eyes, life itself was worthless. The 6 elites were all captivated, and they involuntarily stepped back. They had ignored the 7th tier ultimate elite, and actually joined forces to attack Ling Han. This was absolute treason. Now that this 7th tier was angered, was she going to punish them? Chapter 2958. 2958. Who exactly is it? Chapter 2958. 2958. Who exactly is it? 2958. Who exactly is it? Milady. Pooh! A 6th tier spoke up, wanting to beg for mercy, but just as he opened his mouth, a bloody hole had already appeared in his chest. He wanted to speak, but all that came out of his mouth was blood, and his eyes instantly dimmed. A 6th tier elite was killed just like that. Whether it was Ling Han or the remaining 5 elites, they were all shocked, speechless. The strength of a 7th tier was really unimaginable. That 6th tier's eyes were filled with defiance. He was already a 6th tier, and there were only a limited dozen or so people that were stronger than him in the entire Genesis world. But now he was killed with a single strike, so how could he be willing to close his eyes? Zhu Huo was unmoved, and there was only an endless coldness on her face. It was as if killing a 6th tier did not matter to her at all. Those below 7th tier were all ants. Ling Han suddenly thought of a saying. Even though they were all heavenly venerates, 7th tiers were invincible, undying, and indestructible. There was no need for them to give any regard to anyone at all. If they were displeased with someone, they would kill them. The world was big, but there was no one more powerful than a 7th tier. Let's go! The remaining 5 elites were all scared out of their wits. So what if they were 6th tiers? In front of a 7th tier, they were nothing but prey, mere trash. Zhu Huo was cool and beautiful, yet she was also exuding a boundless killing intent. She stretched out her slender hand, and it was as if the 5 great elites were instantly stopped by an invisible wall. Not one of them managed to escape. There was only the difference of a single tier, yet it was as if there were multiple mountains separating them. The gulf between them was greater than the gulf between heaven and earth. The 5 great elites all showed expressions of despair. Zhu Huo was obviously going to destroy them completely, and a 7th tier did indeed have that kind of strength. No matter how much they struggled, it was useless. Pooh! Zhu Huo was like a goddess of death, destroying a 6th tier with a single strike. Her methods were extremely cold and violent, her slender hand directly penetrating through the other party's chest, not caring at all that her hand was stained with blood. Pah! She smashed the head of another 6th tier, causing blood and brain matter to splatter. A few drops even dripped onto her delicate face, causing her exquisite beauty to have a sliver of demonic cruelty. In front of a 7th tier, a 6th tier was actually so weak. Ling Han knew that 7th tier was strong, but he had never imagined that the gap would be so wide. It was no wonder that though Zhou Heng and Chu Hao were only a line's breadth away from 7th tier, they were still not taken seriously by any 7th tier at all. Without taking that last step, they would be trashed to the ladder. The remaining 3 elites resisted with all their might. They were 6th tier heavenly venerates, and which of them had not gone through trials and tribulations to reach this step? Even if they were only left with despair, they would still battle to the last drop of their blood. However, in front of a 7th tier, they would only be killed with a single punch or palm strike. Zhu was killing intent blazed, and her dark red eyes focused on Ling Han. Her eyes were cold and heartless, as if she was looking at a dead body. She absorbed most of the life essence, but there was still a considerable amount that flowed towards Ling Han. With the life essence of 6 elites added together, this amount still surpassed a single U-boron, making Ling Han feel as if he had earned it back. He hurriedly dismissed these strange thoughts quickly and similarly stared at Zhu Huo. Every single hair on his body stood on end, filled with nervousness. Unbeknownst to him, sweat flowed down his body like a stream, instantly soaking his clothes wet. Ling Han was even wondering, would he have the time to tear a rip into the void and flee if Zhu Huo wanted to kill him? Previously, he had not left, and that was the reason. He had been locked by the divine sense of Juhua. If he made any rash move, he would definitely suffer a thunderous strike from her. He could not afford to take such a risk. This was the true strength of a 7th tier. Ling Han sighed in his mind. He had initially thought that he had battle prowess on par with the 6th tier. So even if he was faced with such ultimate elites like Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains, he could still choose to leave even if he couldn't defeat them. However, from the look of things now, he had been too assuming. Ju Hu didn't speak or make any move. She was just staring coldly at Ling Han. Ling Han naturally didn't speak, either. At present, no matter what movements Ling Han made, it would draw an attack from the other party under the influence of his aura. Since Ju Hua had not made a move all this while, there was still room for him to turn this situation around. Thus, Ling Han did not take any risks. Of course, if Ju Hua made a move, Ling Han wouldn't give up without a fight. He would definitely throw everything on the line to fight. One moment, or an epoch later, Ling Han finally lost all concept of time. He only knew that Ju Hua's killing intent was finally beginning to subside. Her eyes had gone back to normal, and were no longer as red as blood. "Who am I?" she murmured. Her eyes would become fierce at times, and then clear at others, as if two minds were fighting. "Who are you?" Ling Han asked. He was really outrageously bold. He actually dared to provoke her at a time like this. "Who am I?" Ju Hua let out a battle cry, her black locks dancing in the wind. Her figure shot up into the skies. Pung, pung, pung. She directly crashed through the dimension of this level, and all the way upwards, creating a massive hole. It was unknown which level this was, but all the dimensions on the upper levels had practically been crashed through in an instant. She had already entered into the void, and there was no sign of her. Boom! The energy storm surged down from the hole that she had created, turning into a divine waterfall. Ling Han hurriedly retreated. Ju Hua could ignore this storm of energy and directly penetrate it with her physical body, but he couldn't. If he was swept up by it, he would definitely be severely wounded. He left this place and found a place to go into seclusion so he could refine the life essence that he had gained. Then he released the Empress and Hunyeo from the celestial guest residence. After he explained the situation, both women were stunned. Who exactly is this Ju Hua? Is she really a seed that Hysteria had planted in the Genesis world of the last era? However, before she could explode, she was destroyed by that last desperate measure, and this trump card was not used. Hang on, she calls herself Ju Hua. There's only a slight difference between fire and extermination, and if absolute extermination is pronounced the other way around, then wouldn't that be extermination? Extermination was Hysteria's name in the Genesis world from the last era. The three of them exchanged looks, their expressions serious. The Genesis world of the last era had been destroyed, and it was possible that Ju Hua had been unprepared. Thus, her spirit had been wounded by the power of the great destruction, and she was like a blank piece of paper. However, she had absorbed life essence previously, and her instincts had restarted, stimulating her and causing her violent nature to explode, which led her to unleashing a massacre. She had not made a move on Ling Han, probably because she had not awakened her memories yet, and had still been thinking about how well she had gotten along with Ling Han previously. But if the deductions of Ling Han and the others were correct, then when Ju Hua recovered her memory, the entire Genesis world would become her enemy. This was too terrifying. Hysteria had a helper who was in 7th tier, so what kind of terrifying damage would that cause? The situation might not be as terrible as that. Who knows, it might be that Ju Hua was stimulated, and that was why she took some drastic actions, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded slowly. No matter what, I need to increase my strength and advance to the 5th tier as soon as possible. Only then will I have the strength to stand against a 7th tier. Even if he advanced to the 5th tier, he would only be able to match a 7th tier, because 7th tiers were undying and indestructible in terms of physique and could only be suppressed but not killed. However, Ling Han could be injured and killed. It would still be unequal. Ling Han began to search for raw stone mines again. As he continued to cultivate diligently, an incomparably oppressive feeling rose up in him.